Good evening, everybody. How are y'all? Thanks for being here. Welcome to the San Gabriel City Council regular session. It is 6:33, and I'll call the meeting to order. This evening, the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by me. So please rise and face the flag. Right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Pooh?
Here.
Vice Mayor Menchaca?
Here.
Councilmember Costanzo?
Here.
Councilmember Harrington?
Here.
Councilmember Liao?
Here.
Okay, approval of agenda order. Is there any?
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Second.
Okay, motion and second from Councilmember Harrington and Vice Mayor Menchaca. Any objection? Seeing none, it's so ordered. Presentations. This will be introduction of Community Development Administrative Assistant 2, Erika Ortiz.
Good evening, Mayor Pooh and members of the City Council. I'm Mina Chaparian, Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director. I always love coming to you and introducing you to new staff, especially one who's really excited to be here. This evening I am introducing Erika Ortiz. She's our new Administrative Assistant in Community Development. She is the face at the counter when you first walk into City Hall. She comes to us most recently from Parsons Corporation in Pasadena, where she was a facilities coordinator. And prior to that, she worked for about 12 years for the San Gabriel Country Club, where she provided administrative type of services and also did a lot of communications related types of outreach efforts. And most recently, she was actually working on publishing a newsletter for the Country Club. What impressed us the most in the interview process was actually her enthusiasm for wanting to work for the city of San Gabriel. It was something that she had wanted to do for a long time, and when the opportunity presented itself, she thought it would be a great transition to come from where she was at Parsons to the city of San Gabriel. Although she's not a city resident because she lives in Baldwin Park, she feels like she is. She considers San Gabriel her second home. Her story is interesting because her parents actually met and got married in San Gabriel on Hermosa Drive. So I think she has a special connection with the city of San Gabriel. Erika has an associate's degree in communications from Mount SAC, and she's actually in school now working on finishing up her Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration from the University of La Verne. She's expecting to graduate next year, and we will support her in her pursuits. A couple of great facts about her. She's got a twin brother, and he still works for the Country Club. Outside of work, she enjoys hiking and trying out new foods. So, she'll be doing a lot of food tastings with us. She loves some of our local restaurants, including Claro's and Chano's. And she recently learned how to play golf and apparently is becoming better at understanding the game of football. So I think just give it a little bit more time in community development and she will be an expert. Please join me this evening in welcoming Erika to our team.
Good evening, Mayor Pooh. Good evening, Council. Thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. I'm very excited to work for the City of San Gabriel, and I look forward to working with all of you.
Great, thank you, and welcome. Next item, please.
Arts and Humanities Month Proclamation. Presentation will be made by Community Services and Interim Mission Playhouse Director Rebecca Perez.
Good evening, Mayor Pooh and members of the City Council. We are very grateful for your recognition of October as National Arts and Humanities Month. The Mission Playhouse is a vibrant cultural space that promotes the arts and humanities. At the Playhouse, the community can experience a vast range of music, dance, theater, art, and cultural programming by attending our events both on the Playhouse stage and in the outdoor plaza as part of our community engagement events. Just recently, the Mission Playhouse was added to the National Register of Historic Places. This is due in large part to the efforts of resident and historian Senya Lubasic, who dedicated her time and efforts to submitting the application. We are so grateful for this recognition of the Playhouse, which, as Mayor Pooh mentioned at the State of the City, helps to tell the City of San Gabriel's story. As we enter a very busy time of year for the Playhouse, we invite you to attend one of our upcoming events. In the coming weeks, we have something for everyone, including a musical theater production, Chinese-American charity concert, an interactive, slightly scary retro movie, a live recording of an award-winning popular podcast, Mexican mariachi concert, professional caliber dance performance, and one of our much-loved classic silent films accompanied by our mighty Wurlitzer organ. We invite you to visit our beautiful historic theater this season and experience the arts. Thank you again for your support.
Thank you, Rebecca. And we do have this proclamation. Simply says that the City Council of the City of San Gabriel hereby proclaims October as National Arts and Humanities Month in the City of San Gabriel, and call upon our citizens to celebrate and promote the arts and culture in our nation, to specifically encourage the greater participation by those said citizens in taking action for the arts and humanities in their towns and cities. So if the council will join me, I think, Rebecca, you'll be receiving the proclamation? All right, thank you. All right, next item, please.
Public comment. This is the time set aside for members of the public to address the City Council on items of interest that are not on the agenda but are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the San Gabriel City Council. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the City Council cannot answer any questions or take any action until such time as the matter may appear as an item on a future agenda. In an effort to provide everyone with an opportunity to speak tonight, please be aware that all public comments will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. You will receive a 30-second warning as you approach the end of your time. As a reminder, please be respectful of all speakers regardless of the position they take on any items. If you wish to address the City Council, we request that you please complete a speaker's request card and hand it to the clerk. When speaking, please state your name for the record.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 speakers' request cards just for this general public comment portion. First is Brian Jones. Good evening, Mr. Jones.
Good evening. Good evening again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and also the city administration. You may recall that at the last city council meeting, you were kind enough to allow me to describe some of the problems we felt we were having on Country Club Drive regarding traffic, in particular speeding, and the conditions that we perceived at the junction of Roses Road and Country Club Drive. I'm here tonight to actually not to complain again, but to rather express my deep gratitude for the help that we received from the city in terms of the police chief and the director of public works, and also Mr. Lanzarotta, who was able to untangle a communication problem we were having. I was very grateful for that. So again, the police department has helped us with gathering data, with providing officers to show the flag, so to speak. And I know that the Director of Public Works has actually looked at the corners in question and agreed with some of our suggestions, which I hope will not cost very much money, but will be effective. So again, I'd like to express my thanks, and for the record, I hope that will be recorded, and to say in particular the help of Chief Harris and Greg have been very much appreciated. As I say, the suggestions that were made were constructive, they were helpful, and frankly, I felt very proud to be part of the city of San Gabriel. I thought they did an excellent job. It was pleasant, it was, as I say, constructive, and it got the job done. So again, thank you.
Wow, I think that deserves a round of applause. Thank you, Mr. Jones, for taking time to actually come and tell us a little story of things that we're doing right. And there's all kinds of those little stories everywhere. And so coming and bringing it out to our attention, makes us feel also proud and happy to be able to provide that kind of service. The next speaker's request card we have is Mr. Chuck Myers.
Yeah, Chuck Myers, 404 Gerona. Having been involved with budgeting in my professional life quite a bit, both in reviewing and preparation, one thing that really disturbs me about the historical preservation ordinance, looking at it from the get-go, it was to be about a 5-year project. We're still 2.5 years, we are 2.5 years downstream now, and I don't see enough money on the budget to complete the project, because I believe that everything that's going to be spent in the next 5 years should be on either the cash budget, the current year, or the capital budget. And I don't see enough on our budget to complete this project, and that does make me feel anxious. It's going to be in the vicinity of 200 grand to complete it. I've checked with some architectural firms and getting quotes like that. Not that I'm trying to do it, I'm just getting an idea of what it should run. So to do the historical context report, it should take about 25, maybe 30, maybe more. And to do the initial inventory, it's going to take about 180 grand. And so my point being, we should see that on the budget now, because it's a 5-year project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Those are all the public comment cards that we have. Does anybody else like to speak to the council about things of general import? Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment. Next item, please.
Consent calendar. All items listed under the consent calendar are considered routine, and recommendations will be approved in one motion unless a member of the City Council or audience requests separate discussion.
Okay. We do have a request to pull item 4H regarding the LED street lights. I was going to pull that item myself. But is there any comment or question regarding the balance of the consent calendar? All right. We have a motion to first approve 4A through G, please.
Motion to approve.
I have Councilmember Costanzo and then second by Councilmember Leal. Okay. Motion and second. Let's go to the board.
Motion passes by a vote of 5-0.
All right, Mr. Chris Bingham, would you like?
Good evening, Council.
Good evening.
I just have a couple comments about the streetlights, a couple questions, and a couple of concerns. The LED, don't get me wrong, it's the wave of the future. I agree that you should change the streetlights. I think it's ultimately everything's going to be LED. I'm obviously an electrical contractor. I work with LED every day. There are different values of color. There are from warm white to bright white to cool white. A perfect example of that, right outside the door here, you look at the railroad tracks, those lights are white. The rest of the lights in the Mission District are all warm white, and there's a huge disparity. My concern is, first I'm here to maybe educate you guys. The Edison Company has other products available from different values of color, bright. You can't just say, I want some LED lights, and we're going to put them on the street lights. And I might save you from having 200 people here in a couple weeks not liking the color of lights that you put up. So I would ask the council to maybe make an educated decision, maybe work with not the Historical Society, but all the committees in San Gabriel, the renovation, what is Eric's? The preservation, to keep it maybe in the warm side, the warm value, something that matches the existing. I know that people buy light bulbs and you get a bright blue light bulb, and that's what happens a lot of the times with LED, especially with the Edison lights. You have to actually request a certain value of color. Like I said, the range is anywhere from warm to cool. So a little bit of education on that, maybe a little research might help you guys make a better decision, because we want to keep San Gabriel looking the way that it does for the most part. So I'd ask the council to maybe look into that a little bit. So anyways, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. And could I ask Greg to come on up? Would you like to respond, Mr. Lazaretto?
Sure. Mr. Bingham, thank you very much for that input. We have, as Greg is going to mention, we have reached out to Edison already, and they do have a couple of products that they offer, as you said, that range in color from that bright white to the sort of warmer. And what we were going to talk to the council about tonight is potentially having the brighter lights in commercial areas where we want to see for safer and also for pedestrians walking. That would be more appropriate. And then in the residential neighborhoods, having those warmer colors. I will tell everybody it won't match exactly. When you see the two lights next to each other, you'll never be fooled by an LED light versus a traditional light. But we will get as close as we can to matching those warmer colors.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
Hello, Mayor and council members. My name is Greg, the Public Works Director. To address the questions that just came up, Edison does give us a choice of 3,000 and 4,000 Kelvin lights for LED. Our intention was to go with the 3,000 for the residential, which is the vast majority of what we're approving in this phase, or hoping to approve this phase. Those do mimic the high pressure sodium lights that are in deployment right now. They're very similar. They won't match, as you said, but that's close. They will be the soft white yellow. The 4,000 is closer to the white spectrum, but on the yellow side. It's far from that blue that's very bright. But again, the numbers in this go-round is only 34 commercial lights. The vast majority, 426, we would request the 3,000 degree Kelvin lights for the residential areas.
Thank you, Greg. So I wanted to call out this item just first to thank and congratulate you for finally bringing this forward for our city, because I really think that this makes so much sense. I appreciate the comments about trying to match the existing lighting, but this will help provide better lighting throughout the city and also save the city money and save energy. So it's win all the way around, and the city doesn't have to come out of pocket for any of this, the cost of these replacements. The one comment I did wanted to make though is that if these LEDs only use a third maybe of the electricity that the sodium lights currently use, I was a little bit surprised at how low the cost savings would be projected to be. So I was just asked that because here it says I guess in total the SCE's calculations indicate the city would receive a savings of approximately $10,000 a year. But we know we spend regularly at least $30,000 per month, and so I just wanted to make sure that that the cost savings that are also being used to then pay for the cost of this would are accurately reflected and calculated. Because if we cut that energy bill in half or by a third, then that's per month, that's $360,000 per year. To only save $10,000 per year seems like a very small amount of cost savings for the amount of energy that's being saved. So that was my only comment, and if you'd like to respond to that, I'd love to hear.
It does, in the agenda, it references the city's annual budget for these subject lights annually is $66,000. So we would be saving 10 of 66 for this. It does get kind of confusing. Edison, for streetlights, charges a reduced rate. They don't charge what we pay for our house because it's as a safety feature for a city. They actually charge less. But it does
I
get
see.
confusing overall. But there is a savings, and we will be hoping to come back with plans to start converting LS2 circuits, which are city-owned high voltage, where we step down the voltage and convert them to LED. It would be our expense, but we've already started the investment in that. I'd like to continue on with it. We will be meeting with Edison, going through the different circuits we have and looking at the billings and the kilowatt hours used for what we have and what we project, and try to nail them down on what we will save moving forward before we do it.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out, because when it says here that SCE owns and maintains 460 streetlights throughout the city, this set of replacements will only be a small portion of that 460.
Correct.
Approximately how many of those streetlights will be in this first set of replacements?
No, this will be 460.
Oh, this will be 460.
Of thousands of total lights. These are the ones where they're on Edison poles. They're not ours. We just pay Edison a monthly rate. They can throw a light up. These generally happen as residents complain that our street is dark. We don't have the ability to put in poles and lights and the budget to do it. We can pay Edison a monthly fee. They'll throw up a light on one of their Edison poles, and that's generally what these are.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, Vice Mayor Machaco.
Just some clarification. So the savings, if I read it right, it was $2,000 per year for the 20-year payback period, and then after that, it's $10,000 per year. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So it is still a small amount. Is there any savings with maintenance costs? Is there anything that we would do, or is it Edison that does all the maintenance? We just pay them?
For this phase, before and after this conversion, Edison does all the maintenance. So they would see labor savings as LEDs burn out far less frequently as the sodium lights that are out there.
Okay, so there's no maintenance savings on our part. It's strictly the cost of the
Yes,
electrical.
as I'm hoping to come back with another project for LS2 that are city-owned, we would see the maintenance benefit.
Okay.
And with burning out less, another thing is the public will enjoy more reliable lighting. They will see less burnouts. They will call in complaints less of burnt out streets.
Okay, but when there is a burnout, residents have to call Public Works, and then we connect with Edison. Is that the process?
For these lights, it would be.
For other lights, I thought
For
it was...
other lights, we repair them ourselves because we're the owner.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Okay. And then I just wanted to just emphasize, my concern with those blue-white lights. I was able to see the difference between this side and that side right here across the street, and it's significant. And I remember a time when I was on the school board, our Washington parents would complain because the lighting on the tennis courts was quite bright, and so all the residents, especially if their bedrooms faced, the tennis courts, was quite like you. It was very disruptive. So for those 34 commercial fixtures, are any of those near homes, or is it strictly, like, for example, maybe on Valley or some areas like that, or are there homes surrounding these 34 commercial fixture?
I'm not familiar with exactly where they are. They will tend to be along commercial corridors and hopefully not in people's residential windows.
Okay.
Shielding is an option also. I've done some shields when I've converted neighborhoods in the past, and a resident complains that now the light's in my window, it didn't used to be. So we can modify them with shields as well.
I just want to be able to be responsive when those situations do come up.
Sure.
And so, okay. And I think that was all. Thank you.
Councilmember Leal.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just have a quick question regarding energy saving because, this high pressure sodium vapor lights are pretty efficient. I was totally surprised compared to LED. Like Mayor said, we can save at least 1/3, but actually it's not. It's very close to LED lights, but there's 150 watts. As a matter of fact, LED would cost more energy, $351. And why? Why is that? LED consume more electricity than those high pressure vapor sodium?
I think for one, we're talking a very minority of fixtures, if we have any at all, but that you're just looking at a comparison table, and possibly in the very low wattage, that other type is more efficient than LED. I don't really know.
Okay. So another question is, because Edison always have incentives, want people to replace their old light bulbs with LED lights. So in this case, why don't they offer us the incentives? Because what happened is actually the saving is on Edison's side, because all these light bulbs last 10 years longer. So they don't have to go out and change the light bulbs every, so often. So, well, the reason is because the light bulbs for LED is 100,000 hours, and the high pressure vapor is only 12,000. So it's LED lights last 10 times longer, and so they don't have to change the light bulbs so often. So that in this case, the Edison should offer us some kind of incentives to replace that, because they saved a lot of work on their part. So is there such incentives? Do you know?
I'm not aware of one. What our savings are in this scenario is Edison is bothering to manage the entire process, to contract out the work, to put in the labor, and subsidize it with energy savings. Our savings is 100% just kilowatt hours savings. As far as their reduced labor, that probably is an incentive for them to bother with this program for other cities. As we get to the LS2 poles that we own, we would get that benefit as well in maintenance, but I'm not aware of any additional program. Already this is not a very big program. For Edison to change a couple hundred lights, it's not a big deal.
Okay. So. Okay, last question. I guess you already mentioned there are 2 high voltage owned by city, and this has been my question for the past 6 years, because those 2 lights every month costs about $15,000. And so, whoa, average light bulb, average street light is about $8. So I said, whoa, why is such a high electricity bill? But maybe we should take care of those 2 high voltage, and maybe we can bring down the electricity costs. So maybe that's something that we should work on. And those owned by the city, like you said. So that's our next project. And maybe if we have time, we should look at all the city's buildings for energy conservation. Okay.
We are going out for an RFP for proposals for professional services to evaluate the energy needs of the city. That's going to go out this year. We'll get a list of consultants and maybe pick one, maybe not, but we are moving forward with that plan. As far as 2 light bulbs in the city that cost $15,000, I'm not aware of them.
Yeah.
When we are going to meet with Edison, I will bring in our city electricians who are familiar with every light we have in the city. And we are going to decide where we should do our transformer blocks and convert the circuits, where the city gets the most bang for the buck in maintenance savings and electrical savings and reliability.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And Councilman Liao, on your first question regarding the 50-watt bulbs and why those are actually not a savings but a cost, the reason is because that table actually shows the value with the conversion costs. So that's the cost we pay for the first 20 years. That savings differential on those lower wattage bulbs, we don't save enough to actually cover the cost of the bulb itself. But after those 20 years are up, we save on those, just those 101 bulbs, we save about $1,500 a year. And all total, that $2,400 that we save a year becomes $10,000 a year. So there is savings, but there's not enough savings to finance those lower watt bulbs during those first 20 years.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. And Mr. Bingham, did you want to make a quick comment? I'll allow that. Yeah. Go ahead.
In my mind, I know there's a million products out there. The 3000, he says, mimics the high pressure sodium. I kind of disagree. It's still going to be bright white. I don't know if that product comes in 27K, which is the next level, closer to warm. That might be something to figure out. Do they make that product in any other size? There's a million products out there. I hate to just say it's either 3000 or 4000. There's a million different ways to go on that. In my mind, the 3000 is still too bright.
We will look into that. Edison gave us the choice of 3000 and 4000. And I don't know exactly in the retrofit Cobra head that must be used, do we have choices of the whole spectrum? We know LED lights come all the way up to 7,000 and all the way down to 1,800 or something. But in this particular conversion of Edison's fixtures, I don't know.
Maybe
We'll
we
ask.
can look
Okay.
into that. I
Thank-
think just say, let's use these. That's great.
We will ask.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to
I'll
approve.
second.
Okay, motion and second. Let's go to the board.
Motion passes by a vote of 5-0.
Next item, please.
New business, item A, Memorandum of Agreement with San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments. Presentation will be made by Assistant City Manager and Community Development Director Armine Shaparian.
Good evening again, Mayor Pooh and members of the City Council. The item before you tonight is the Memorandum of Agreement between the City of San Gabriel and the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments. As I presented to the City Council at its last meeting, coyote sightings in the last several years have continued to grow in the city and the region as a whole. A coyote management task force was formed by the San Gabriel Council of Governments to look at the issues on a regional basis and identify some possible solutions. The task force developed a regional coyote management framework that member agencies can adopt and modify. And as a result of this, a coyote management implementation plan was completed, which offers various services. Since the last City Council meeting, staff actually communicated and worked with the COG to update the deliverables that were originally identified in the Memorandum of Agreement that would be more specific to the City of San Gabriel. As we heard comments from the Council, that's something we desire to do. And this evening, what you have in front of you is a revised version of the original Memorandum of Agreement, which includes some terms that are specific to the city. According to the Memorandum of Agreement, if the city chooses to enter into this agreement, the COG will coordinate and implement 2 community meetings trainings every year within the City of San Gabriel. It will diligently market the community meetings trainings prior to the event dates. There are no guarantees on the levels of attendance. Participate in 1 local family youth event to disseminate coyote safety information every year within the City of San Gabriel. Conduct 1 meeting with San Gabriel school officials every year to discuss campus's coyote safety measures. Coordinate to send mailers to neighborhoods with high number of human coyote encounters and incidents based on input from city staff. Manage a website or web page that contains important and helpful information for residents and businesses regarding coyotes. Maintain an online regional coyote incident reporting system for residents of the city. Provide us with statistics from the incident reporting system and present an annual report to the City Council. Develop and maintain a regional coyote reporting hotline. Continue coordinating with various agencies, including California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the County of Los Angeles, and other relevant external stakeholders on regional coyote management efforts. Provide electronic files of coyote marketing and outreach materials. Manage the invoicing. And as you will notice in the agreement, we've also inserted a line here regarding having them itemize services that will be provided to us when the invoicing is done. This agreement is for a 2-year term at $10,000 a year. It will commence, if approved, starting on November 1st, go through 2020. In addition, the city will also have a component that we will be responsible for, which really is to work with the COG on all the participation and coordination efforts. And the agreement will be from November 1 through October of 2021. The recommendation this evening is for the City Council to authorize the City Manager to execute the Memorandum of Agreement and authorize $10,000 to be transferred from the General Fund Contingency Account to pay for the implementation of the agreement. Unfortunately, because COG staff is attending 2 other council meetings this evening with the cities of Temple City and Covina, they are not able to join us. I'm available to answer any specific questions you may have. And I think Joe Chen is here with me since we are the 2 staff members currently dealing with coyote-related issues. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Armene. We do have some speakers' request cards for this item. First is actually, I think, meant to be taken together, Priscilla and John Geddes, because the second one here says you need 6 minutes.
I will see whatever minutes I have left.
So you want to do it separately then?
Yes.
Okay, then Priscilla Geddes, please. Thank you.
We've been a resident for over 44 years, and I have seen the coyote problem explode in the last 20, and particularly in the last 5. We back up to the cemetery. We see coyotes there all the time. If you don't have a chain link fence back there, you don't understand that they can get right over that. We've had 3 incidents on our street on Coolidge in down Milton where we've had to call out someone. People have called the police. They don't do anything. And yet on your website it says call the police. That blows my mind. The Humane Society did catch one who was caught in a fence. The other one was 2 men on Coolidge who chased a coyote that had been roaming all morning, chased it with a baseball bat and a shovel, pound, 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 down the block and up into San Marino. Now that we may think that's fine, but you know they come right back. I would like to see us have local control. I think sending $20,000 out to a group that's going to jabber about it, post stuff. We don't have a lot of people who check your website. For one thing, I looked for the hotline, couldn't find it. It says call the police. They don't like that. Where are our statistics? Do we have any that show us our statistics in our within our boundaries? Those are questions I have. I'd like to see stats published and locations. I'd like to see us hire a professional instead of sending out a new group to study it. So I cede my time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. John Geddes.
Thanks very much. I didn't expect to speak. I've had about 30 minutes with this memorandum of understanding or agreement, I guess is what it is. And I want to start with, first of all, John Geddes, 441 Coolidge Drive, St. Gabriel. I want to start with filling in Priscilla's story about the 2 people running down the street chasing the coyote out of the neighborhood. Our neighborhood is, we hold parties once a year, street parties where we block off the street, and was glad to hear at the last meeting that you're not going to charge for that. And we get along pretty well in the neighborhood. And we watch out for people. Jane, one of the people in the neighborhood, used to take walks with a golf club. And she used to take walks because she liked to, but she was concerned about coyotes. She doesn't take them with a golf club anymore because she's got a very small dog who she thinks will chase away the coyotes. It won't. And so she was walking up in our neighborhood up on Coolidge. She lives down in Milton. And coyote was out there. And so these 2 guys from the end of the street chased this thing all the way down the street until San Marino. So I think of things like that when I look at some of the things that are in this agreement. In the indemnification, for example, we indemnify the COG. But that basically means if the COG teaches people how to handle the coyotes and doesn't work, the city takes the fall. It's your expense. Somehow something like that needs to be addressed in this. If there's termination and the city of San Gabriel terminates the agreement, we're still on the hook for the $20,000. Maybe you'll get a discount, but it's up to and including the full $20,000. You're paying the $20,000 within 8 months before the first year is even out. So think about that. You have no leverage after July 1st of the first year. There are other things in here too that I'm concerned about. Here's either party may change the designation set forth herein upon written notice to the other party. Unilateral changes, how in the world do you handle that? You know, it just becomes fighting. People have to agree with things, and that tells me, okay.
If you have a final point to make, Mr. Geddes?
I do, and that's what I'm going to do.
Okay, thank you.
The 4 events that are to be put on, where's the education for the schools? I thought we were talking about having that going on too. The other thing is, who pays for these meetings? Who pays for the facilities? Who pays for the setup, the takedown, the balloon clowns? You know, who pays for that? None of that's in here, and so you'd be signing up for $20,000 plus the cost to run the program in our city. Just some thoughts.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Geddes. We have one more speaker's request card for this item, and it's Sue Fitzsimmons.
Mayor Pooh, City Council, good evening. Sue Fitzsimmons here. I was very, very disappointed at the last council meeting when the council almost overwhelmingly approved to go forward with this COG agreement. $20,000 is an awful lot of money to spend on research for coyotes. All you have to do is go to the Wildlife Association, go on the internet. There is all kinds of information that's already published, studies that have been done on coyotes. They're here to stay. They're not going anywhere. We have to learn to coexist with them. I have had pets that have been eaten by coyotes. It's very sad, but it's a fact of life. Things have changed. The coyotes no longer have an area to where they live. They have come down into our area for food sources. They eat rodents, they eat birds, they eat, unfortunately, small dogs and cats. They also eat fruit. In the last 10 years, how many fruit trees have we seen come into our city? A lot more than what we used to. This is a feeding source for these animals. There are people in the city who feed them. It is published in all of these documents. This is why we see the coyotes and they're not afraid of us, because people feed them. We need to institute a program to where if someone is caught feeding them, they need to be fined $300 to $500. Other cities are doing this. Okay, some of the solutions is education. For $20,000, you can buy a whole lot of whistles, a whole lot of ammonia. You don't have to get the wolf spray or the wolf urine. You can get ammonia. You can put ammonia on rags and put it around your territory. They do not like that. They will stay away from it. We as citizens need to get smart. Understand City Council is getting letters, pictures all the time from the citizens that are very gruesome. It is our responsibility as citizens to look after our own neighborhoods. If the city has that much money that they want to spend, $20,000, I have a suggestion. why not spend $2,300 and buy vet insurance for our police canines instead? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzsimmons. Mrs. Fitzsimmons. Those are all the speakers' request cards that I have. Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to speak to the council about this issue? Okay, seeing none, I guess we'll proceed with council discussion and questions. Anybody like to start? Yeah, Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you, Mayor. I think some of my thunder was already taken because I had a lot of those same points about the contract that Mr. Geddes brought up. But I had more than 30 minutes to review it. So last meeting, some of the items that I brought up, we now have a little more specificity. And that's actually why I wanted to do it, to draw out when they said we're going to have education for kids. That's very general. And now we know, we have an idea of what they're talking about. I don't say we know, we have an idea. Just the very first comment, I have a few comments and then some questions. My first comment about the contract in general is it's called a Coyote Management Plan, Implementation Plan by title. This plan does not manage coyotes, so that right there, it's a misnomer. So I don't agree to sign something that says we're managing coyotes when we're not, because when you take the words management, it means to manage the coyotes, and implementation is implementing that management plan. So we're not even implementing it. So it sounds really great in government speak, but in reality, nothing gets accomplished. So how does the plan manage coyotes? That's a question I have to COG and a question to staff. How are we managing the coyotes? And we can answer them later, but to me, this should be called the San Gabriel Residents Management Plan, because that's really what we're doing. We're not managing the coyotes, we're managing the residents. So is there actually a COG management plan? And if so, could it be attached to this contract so that we could actually see what COG is doing to manage coyotes? If there is, it should have been attached when they proposed this agreement to us. And just in general, like I said, this title gives the residents a false sense of action by the city and by COG. I'll skip that one because it's kind of a little too much. But so what we are actually getting when I ask for specificity is we're getting 2 community meetings. This is for $10,000 per year, so you can double everything. So 2 per year. 1 family youth community event. And to me, that sounds like they're going to attend an event, not throw an event. So if we have an event, they'll attend it. 1 meeting with school officials. So the original bullet points made it sound like we're going to education at all the schools, the kids are going to have programs. None of that is actually happening. That's why I wanted the specificity in the contract. Now we have a better idea of what we're buying. And I still don't agree with it, even with the specificity. Another thing is the mailers to the neighborhoods with high numbers of coyote incidents. What's a high number? To me, if it's in front of my house, 1 is a high number. If it's in front of someone else's house, or they just see one, is that an incident? Is it report? Because maybe the coyote just ran by. So we have no definitions of that. It's something where it'd be nice to have some clarity or some specificity. And once again, this time I actually, the schools, like I mentioned, educating kids is probably more important than adults, because coyotes are more than likely not going to come after an adult simply because of their size. I mean, coyotes are dogs and they're going to come after something smaller rather than larger in general. That's not always the case. So kids are actually more important to me than the community meetings, the education part of it for the schools. I think we could partner with the library as well and a couple other things that would actually be more effective. So those were the things that I would say are quote unquote new that we're getting in the contract. The things we already have is the website. We already have all the materials published. Like Ms. Fitzsimmons said, it's easily available for someone that's researching it. More than likely, if someone did a research, they probably wouldn't find the COG. They probably wouldn't even find San Gabriel. They would find some YouTube stuff. They would find lots of stuff about coyotes. So it's not really adding value. It's a bullet point that I don't think is giving us anything. We've had this Fullerton study for a long time. I've never really seen any result from it. So then my question about the annual report and the database is the database going to be public so that the residents can actually see the recent reports, like they can kind of see hot spots, where it is. If it's not, what good is it doing the public? And then what action does the city take with this data once we receive it in the annual report? Because that, if it's just filed away, the report and the data just get filed away, it doesn't really do much. And this really is not an action plan. It's not a management plan. It's just, once again, bureaucracy. And then for the mailers, I wanted to know, not exactly, but what type of content are we talking? Is it going to say you've had incidents in your area, be aware, or is it going to be informational? Here's how you deal with coyotes. So once again, it's kind of just like, hey, we're going to give mailers with high numbers of incidents, but it's not saying what it is. I'm assuming this is going to get approved because it was a 4-1 last time. I don't know that I'm persuasive enough to not sign this agreement. So if we sign it, there's some things I'd like changed, which is I want it to be a 1-year term. I don't know why we would sign a 2-year term, because after the first year we don't like it. Why are we in this? Once we execute, unlike what Mr. Geddes said, we have no leverage for the entire 2 years because we can't get out of this short of breach. There's no way we're getting out of this. And the way it's written, it's impossible to breach this. I would like to include a no-fault termination that includes a prorated refund of whatever. If you prorate it for the 2-year period, if we just say, hey, you know what, we're not enjoying this, let's get our money back even though we've prepaid. Let's get back the balance of the 2 years. So if we're in year 1 and 2 months into year 2, we would get 80% of, or 8,000 of the 2-year term back. So I mean, I don't know why we would sign something without a no-fault termination when it's completely voluntary on our side, and we're paying for a service, and if we don't like that service, we should be able to walk away from it, because they're getting a lump sum. There's no money tied to any one of these items, so we should be able to prorate it, unless they can detail a bill for, let's say we happen to have 2 events out of the 4, maybe we can prorate that, because it's to me it's still very general. And then just a couple cleanup items that are just drafting. Sections 3 and 6 have subsections A but no B. Generally in legal contracts, you don't have a section A unless you have a section B. So those should just be a heading with the words. That's just a cleanup. And then section, there's no space between section 6A and B. They're jammed together, and everything else in the contract, all the sections are spaced, so that should be cleaned up. That type of stuff just bothers me when I see contracts. So those are my questions. So I don't know if you have anything to answer tonight, or some of those might have to go to COG.
I think some of these I may have to address with COG. It's unfortunate that we don't have someone here this evening to help answer some of them. I will say that, I'm going to go back to some of your initial questions. At the last presentation we did, there was a coyote management implementation plan that was included. The way they have the agreement set up, it's not included as an exhibit. I don't anticipate that it would be an issue for us to include that as an exhibit, where if council wishes for us to include the original coyote implementation plan that the COG developed, we can include that as an exhibit of the agreement. There is such a document which details all of the different community outreach efforts and all the information similar to the implementation plan we already have in place.
Okay, so I read that last time, and that's kind of where my question came from. That was more of an informational document. I wanted to know, what are they doing with the coyotes, if anything? Because if it's just the education and the outreach and all that stuff that was in the first report, it really is not a coyote management plan, is my point.
Well, that is their plan.
Okay.
Their plan is education, outreach, working with the community, providing meetings and tracking the statistics. A key element of that is really to encourage our residents to use the different databases that are there to enter the information. The goal would be that we would publish the statistics as they provide us with a report. I think it would be important to have that available on our website and share that with the community, and continue encouraging our residents to enter any sightings they're seeing. I've actually gone in with the existing system we've had and tried to see what's in there. We're not getting residents reporting the sightings. I think I've gotten more information from Nextdoor than I have on the database. And our police department does track the calls for service. And as I mentioned at the last council meeting, between June of last year and June of this year, we've had 31 calls for service specific to sightings. And then we've tracked more recently the direct communication we've had with residents regarding what experiences they've had. I think some you've heard about tonight from residents. I'm going down the questions you raised. The clarity I received from the COG is they will be available at one of our events. I think that was a comment you raised. So if we have a community event where we want them to be present and provide information, they can do that. And I think the question you asked, Councilmember Harrington, regarding having this be a one-year term, I think that's something we need to communicate back with the COG if that's what council wishes to do, whether or not that's something that they want to work with us to do. Thank you.
And the termination.
I'm sorry?
And the no-fault termination.
I made a note of that.
Well, I think our city attorney would like to respond to some of those legal points.
Well, I just want to talk about the termination provision. So the way the contract reads, within 45 days, we pay $10,000. And the way I read that, that's essentially not refundable.
That's my point.
However, if we terminate without fault, and it takes place prior to January of 2020, then we would only pay for any additional costs that exceeded the 10,000. I'm not sure what happens after we pay.
So that's my exact point. I agree with you.
Yeah.
My point is, why are we agreeing to that?
Oh, well.
That's my point.
Rather than have them prorate the amount back.
Well, I mean, I would just, so for example, the 10,000 I'm assuming is not for the period between now and January, right? It's for the first year. And then they're making us pay for the second year over a year in advance.
Yeah, the way this is written, we pay for each year in advance.
Yeah, and we're locked in, and we have no recourse after the very first payment. Well, we have within, like you said, the first 45 days, but then we're still stuck with the 10,000. So let's say we get in there, they set it up, we don't like it, we're stuck for 20 grand. After January. That's kind of my point. It's like, why would we sign that? If someone came to my house with a contract like that, whether it was a service agreement or...
Let me interject for a second.
I would be out of that.
Because
get off my porch.
I sit on the COG board, and this has been discussed at the COG board. First of all, I want to clarify that the termination provision here actually says that the MOU may be terminated by either party at any time, with or without cause.
Yes.
So if we're very unhappy after a certain period of time, we can terminate, and we won't have to pay the second year. Secondly, the point of why this payment in advance is because it's a new program, and the COG actually needs to hire additional staff and consultants to be able to actually implement the program. So, I don't want to speak 100% for the COG because I only have heard and seen what has been presented at the board, and I don't know exactly the details of the staffing and the various other experts and so forth that the COG will engage in helping each of the cities that have signed up for this to manage it. There's, I think, 12 cities, including Alhambra, and let's see if the list is here, who have already sort of signed up for this to help sign up for the COG management program. So I just wanted to make it clear that the contract is we can terminate at any time. It's not as if it's like ironclad, like something you're locked into for these 2 years.
Well, we can terminate, but we don't get our money back. So what's the purpose of terminating? Because then we've paid for services not rendered. That's my point. If we terminate, we should get a proration of whatever the term left is.
So why don't we can say then that I think it makes your mood about asking for a 1-year term completely moot, and irrelevant, because
what if we terminate?
Because if you're unhappy with the service, then you can terminate before the end of the first year. You don't have to pay the second year.
But you've paid $10,000. Let's say in February or March of 2020, we don't like it. We've gotten 3-4 months of service. We paid $10,000 for 3 months.
But if you think, if collectively we say that we want to give this program a try, why would we terminate within 3 months without having to received any benefit?
Have you ever entered into a contract and 2 months later you said this is a terrible vendor?
No, I
have.
And
I've terminated, and I've always had, because I deal hundreds of contracts a year in my professional life, And we've terminated month 1. We've
I
terminated
do as
month
well,
2.
and that's the point of negotiations. You try not to enter into contracts that you aren't going to be happy with.
Correct. So you have an escape clause.
And there is one.
But we pay, so it's not a true one. It's like saying,
Well-
I have a parachute, but it's made out of cement.
Let me jump in here for a second. Councilmember Harrington is correct that the thing that's missing out of here that you might expect to see is if we do elect to terminate it, it's not clear in my mind what happens to the money we paid where we haven't even received services. So it does set up a scenario next July we pay, but that's before that second year starts. Now the second year starts and we decide, hey, it's a bad idea. What happens to that 10,000 we paid? We're not going to get any service for it at that point. You'd think
That's
in
correct.
fairness they would refund that. I think that that's probably something that we should be able to ask reasonably to be added to this agreement.
Or we could just evaluate and decide whether or not we want to do the second year before the end of the first year. But, okay.
Well, yes, but keep in mind that the second year starts on October 31st of 2021. I'm sorry, that's where it ends.
2020.
So the second
But
year
we're
starts,
paying in July.
yeah, October 31st, 2020, but by July 1st, 2020, we have to pay the 10,000. So it's about,
I see.
it's
It's
significantly
based
before
on,
that year even starts.
It's based on fiscal year, for the billing is based on fiscal year.
Yeah.
Well,
and we'd
I think
actually have
that's
to do
also,
it in June because you have a 30-day waiting period before the termination is effective. So it's even 30 days before the second term. So we'd have to know by June whether we want that second year that starts in October.
But I think those are some comments we should share back with COG, and also if they're going to be coming back to us and providing us with an annual report, I think there's a timing issue there as far as we coordinate this timing of when do we have them come to council and provide the annual report, provide the statistics, and at that time, if there's discussion at the council level whether or not we continue for the second year, that may be a time where that discussion could take place should the council desire to do so.
I also wanted to just address the issue that Mr. Geddes brought up about the indemnity. It is actually a fairly standard mutual indemnity.
Yeah, I meant to comment on that too. It is a mutual indemnity. Basically, it's saying we indemnify them for our mistakes, they indemnify us for their mistakes. As far as what those might be and what liability may come out of this agreement, it's hard to know exactly. There was a suggestion made by a member of the public that if we ill-inform somebody, or they ill-inform somebody, we might be on the hook for that. Actually, Government Code Section 818.8 provides a pretty broad blanket immunity for misrepresentations, including unintentional misrepresentations of governments that cause injury. So providing the information is probably not a source of liability. It's probably something, if you were going to try to imagine a scenario, it would be probably something that occurs at one of these public meetings where somebody was supposed to, I don't know, control the door or something, or there's some...
Like a slip and fall in one of our meetings.
Something like that. Yeah. I will mention that the agreement, it provides that both us and COG have to obtain and maintain insurance for that, and that's really where we would be looking to mitigate those risks.
Okay. Anything further? Okay, Vice Mayor Menchaca.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say that I still believe we need to go regional. We've been local. We've tried this. We have an assistant city manager and a staff that's been trying to spend time on this, and it's more than $10,000 if we carve out that your time and the staff. I know some of the other cities, they've spent, they've hired part-time people just for the trapping program. That's more than $10,000. They've hired, I think it was Lancaster, $70,000 for a full-time person just to manage whatever you want to call it, coyote management, whatever you want to call it, but just to address the coyote issue. I do agree that if there is a way of perhaps being able to enter it within a year and we can evaluate at the end of the year, I can see that I would be open to. But chasing the coyotes to another city, San Marino in this case was mentioned. I'm right next to San Marino. So, that doesn't help me or my neighbors. We talked about this before. I mean, this is not the first agenda item. Well, we all agree that this was a regional issue. It wasn't just the city. The coyotes don't know any boundaries. I think we need to move forward. We tried the local approach. It's not working. Let's try the regional. For $10,000, you can't hire even a quarter part-time person. I think this is something that we should try. And if it doesn't work, then we move on and we find something else. But I don't think it's. I think this is a good plan that we should at least entertain and be part of. And just like any other plans, they may take time to evolve and be effective, but at least we're moving forward. And I would like to enter into this agreement with maybe some changes. I don't know if it'd be better to bring it back, but I do agree that we do need to have some ability to commit for at least 1 year without being forced on the second year.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Machaca. First, Councilmember Leal.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So I just have a quick question. We're supposed to set up a hotline, and who's going to answer those hotlines? Is it St. Gabriel Valley COG staff, or we're going to hire a person to answer the hotline?
It will be monitored by the COG, so they will have an automated number, and we've had communications with them as far as when you're getting calls from our city, how will we know? Will there be a greater level of customer service? And as far as what we've been reassured is the COG will be managing the hotline. They will be providing us with information and getting back to residents that are calling them to make sure if whatever questions they have are being answered.
Okay. So, yeah, my concern is, we reported the hotlines, and the staff said, stay away from coyotes, don't put the food out. All that advice is great, but what if the coyote is still coming? And what else? What kind of step that we can take? Can we call a trapper? Because, like I said during the last meeting, I have a trapper can do everything for $500. They put up this trap and kill the coyote and dispose it for $500. So, if situation gets worse, can resident personally call a trapper and pay for it out of their own pockets, or can city call the trapper to catch them?
So 2 different answers. The first answer is as a private resident on your private property, if you have a circumstance where you want to call a trapper, that is your right as a property owner. You can do that. Mm-hmm. You call, there's several different companies out there that provide that service. That's something you can do, and I think at the last meeting we mentioned that sometimes private property owners have a little bit more leverage than we do as a public entity. Right. However, in situations where there's exigent circumstances, there's a dire situation, and a trapping service needs to be utilized. You've heard us mention at the last meeting that is something we can do, and currently we're actually working on gathering information on who some of those trapping companies are, and because the cost ranges as we've seen.
That's true.
We would like to know what that range is today and have some information available so that if there is a circumstance where that service needs to be used and it's within the purview of the city manager as far as kind of the budgetary limit, that's something we would do. We would just make sure city council is aware of that decision if that decision is made.
So another concern, actually I don't want them killed. I kept mentioning that. We put them back to the mountain and don't feed them down here, and they should be okay. But I heard this story. This lady, she starts this program. She wants to catch them and put the tag on the coyote's ear and make a study, where they run to, and so we can have a better idea where they live, and however, unfortunately, the state put a stop on this study, and I guess maybe because the budget issues. So originally, I like that idea, catch them and put them back, don't kill them. But now this program doesn't work. So another proposal from the COG is they provide a bottle of Walsh urine, and it's a $30 bottle. So I thought, well, maybe that would give them away. But however, if we sign up with this COG program agreement, can COG provide that many bottles of urines for our residents? So do you have an answer for that?
I do. I think that's something I spoke to the COG today. I think that's a question that's been raised. This agreement does not include the COG providing additional items, including predator urine. As we discussed at the last meeting, currently, if as a private resident, if that's something you want to use, it is available that you can purchase that on your own. I think the cost varies. Amazon has it for $27.99, I think, for a small container. It could be wolf urine. It could be just synthetic predator urine. It's not something that's included as part of the memorandum of agreement that we're discussing tonight. I think that's something we also want to continue exploring, and should residents ask us for different hazing ideas, a lot of that information is actually all already available on our website. We have it as part of our management plan, and I hear that there are some residents who are trying it. Whether or not it works, I'm not sure, but I have heard from some of our local residents that they have used it on the perimeters of their home.
Yeah. So I heard from the mayor of Acadia, he said, no, it's not working. So maybe you try ammonia, and it's cheaper. For this, I would think it's a regional issue. It's not just city of San Gabriel, because these coyotes are running down from the washes, especially not just the Alhambra Wash, Rubio Wash. They're from everywhere, and they come down here for food. So I think we should work with the COG cities and work it out as a regional issue. But however, I think if we don't like the program, I guess we can just terminate. And in the contract, we can terminate the agreement with or without any cost. So just give it a try.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I did want to share, I was actually text messaging with the COG as I was presenting. I wanted to ask them the question whether or not we can enter into a 1-year agreement. And the answer I received is, unfortunately, that's not an option that the COG can do, because the agency requires 2 years of sustainable funding to run the program that they are proposing. And the Coyote Task Force, it would be difficult to implement if it's based on 1 year, because I think the way they're trying to plan for 2 years. So I did want to give council that piece of information.
Thank you. Councilmember Costanzo.
Thank you, Mayor Pooh.
Sure.
I was one of the 4 that at the last meeting did want to move forward with this plan of action. And one of the reasons being was because I've sat on the COG board and been a part of many programs that they have implemented over the years, and very much successful. But after seeing the line items of what they're going to do, I've come to the conclusion that our money would not be well spent. 2 community meetings, we can get people from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, then we could set up a community meeting on our own and not have to pay a $10,000 a year fee. I also was under the impression that they would do in-school training with all the kids at different campuses, and this just sounds like they're going to have information once a year, and you hope that the youth show up, but I don't think it's going to be as successful. And they're going to conduct 1 meeting with the San Gabriel school officials. Is that at a school board meeting, which are not necessarily well attended unless there's an issue going on. Sending mailers to neighborhoods with high numbers. I mean, all of this that they're doing, I think that we could do on our own. Coyote catchers already in place, and like you said, I get most of my information of where coyotes are next door. And that's if they report them. I think we're all looking for a magic pill, and I was hoping that that might be it, and that somehow once we spelled everything out, we would see the advantages of going with the COG, because I think they do put on good programs. But if this is the list of what they're going to be providing us for $10,000 or $20,000, I just don't think it's not going to solve the problem. It's the same as Sue Fitzsimmons says, I mean, we can get all this information. We don't have to go to the COG website. We can get it on our own already. So I've changed my mind. I hate to put the burden on city staff because I know how much it does burden staff, but I think with maybe the proper organization, we could do just as good a job as the COG is saying that they can do. So it is a regional project. It is a regional problem, but there's not really any finite solution of how to do it. It is something that we have to deal with every day. I know, as Mrs. Getty says, that she lives behind or in front of the cemetery, and I have a wash behind my house, so it's a similar situation where you see them each and every day, and you just learn to deal with them and do the best you can. So again, that's just my opinion after I was hoping for something more than just this, and I'm not seeing it.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Costanzo. I think for myself, I first wanted to address a couple of the comments that were made by members of the public, because it is illegal to feed coyotes, you know, and so if you're aware of community members who are actually feeding coyotes, you know, please report it and we'll try to take care of it. You know, that certainly is not something that we should be encouraging or condoning. Secondly, you know, there are some newer faces here in this conversation. This is something that we've been discussing for several months now. We had an expert come and give us a presentation about the coyotes. And I just wanted to review some of those key messages, which is, you know, first of all, that these are territorial animals, and that obviously their territories have nothing to do with the city lines, neighborhoods. They don't care if you live on Roses or you live on Benkamp, you know. And so one of the things that I had mentioned in those earlier conversations is, well, is there any way for us to be able to understand these territories, their territories? We had learned during that process that there were coyotes denning at the golf course, the country club, and that they did trap. And unfortunately, there's no way of being able to trap and relocate. I guess studies have also shown that if you relocate coyotes, it's essentially the same as killing them. They won't survive in their new environment. So I believe, you know, Mark said at our previous meeting when we talked about this, you know, if you trap 95% of the time, it means trapping and killing. And then I think another point that came up in some of those earlier presentations is that it's not, unless the threat level is high enough, it wouldn't be legal for the city to trap either. You need to have an imminent threat. I'm not sure if that's the exact legal language. I don't know if you remember it, City Attorney.
Well, the question was whether we can go onto private property to deal with coyotes, which is a little bit of a different matter, and that falls under the same general rule of other police work, which is if you've got a exigent circumstance where life is being threatened or there's a threat of injury, then we can respond to it immediately, and I think that's what the chief, I think, mentioned, or maybe it was Armine earlier. As far as what we can do, you know, if we're a property owner too, if we've got it on city property, we can respond like other property owners.
Right.
If it's on public property.
I see. The other points that our expert consultant made were that if you happen to trap and kill the alpha male or alpha female, that actually could exacerbate your problem. Other coyotes, because of their territorial animals, that could create a void in and then therefore other coyotes will move into the territory, and it's actually a worse problem if you actually kill the alpha female, because then the other females in the territory or in the area will go into heat, and then they will mate, and they will have more litters, more pups than before. So given all this complexity and not knowing exactly what are these territories, and I totally agree, areas like the cemetery, I think there are, and maybe there are currently, and there have been dens there, that would be a matter too to take up with the church. The country club, another big wide open area that we know there have been dens and there's been trapping, not convinced that that's necessarily helped. In some sense, we might be seeing this spike possibly because of that activity. So, and then the other point I wanted to mention, which I mentioned last time at the last meeting, was just that I think that I agree with Mrs. Fitzsimmons and a lot of what she said. Wildfires, the drought, things like this have pushed these animals further and further into our neighborhoods, and I think made wildlife in general more desperate, more desperate for food, water, and that has certainly increased the amount of human-wildlife interactions throughout the region. So I think I agree with my colleagues, Vice Mayor Menchaca and Councilmember Liao, because they're territorial animals, and we cannot, from where we are, our small 4-square-mile city of San Gabriel, understand what are the patterns of behavior. The thing I disagree with Mrs. Fitzsimmons on is that this is not a study. It's not really just a study. I think the information and the data will be very helpful in helping to inform what other things we may be able to do as a city. And in my mind, that's actually one of the most valuable parts of this agreement, is having regional information, so we can collect data from more than just within the city of San Gabriel. As Armene mentioned, there's only been, I don't know if you say it's a lot or a little, but there's been 31 calls for service in the last fiscal year related to coyotes. And maybe there's more activity on Nextdoor. I've also heard other stories, like one person reports they take a picture of a coyote in the morning, and then 3 hours later somebody else posts the same picture of a coyote, in the noontime. And then so there becomes this perception of like all these coyotes are roaming the streets, but it's really just the same coyote. And it's not to disparage or doubt that there have been more coyotes in our neighborhoods. I've seen them myself, and I've never felt threatened by them. They usually are minding their own business. I've seen them walk through Vincent Lugo Park. I've seen them walk down the street, but I've never felt threatened by them, and they never seem to be just aggressive towards anybody, any human or anything related to human activity. They seem to be just doing their own thing. And I think the other thing I wanted to point out too is another thing I really agree with Mrs. Fitzsimmons on. I'm sorry to keep referring back to it, but it triggered a lot of thoughts that I've been having about this over the past several months that we've been discussing this. Is people need to be able to take care of their own property and their own pets. And so, as we've said numerous times, if you want to take certain action on your own private property, you are actually free to do so. This doesn't have to be a city thing where we come to your house to scare off coyotes or to trap them for you. And all these other solutions, I think, also all privately available. Whistles, and I think that whistles are probably a very low cost way of trying to address the problem. Some have said that even whistles aren't working anymore, and the coyotes have become habituated to the hazing, and that very well may be true. I don't know, because every coyote I've seen has just walked off on its own, and there's never been any real. It's not a I don't know, threatening experience in my opinion. So yeah, any citizen can go get a whistle, go get some ammonia, or is that what it is, ammonia? Or wolf urine, bear urine, knock yourself out. I personally don't necessarily want a urine smell all over my house, but maybe it will come to that if coyotes are circling my house for some reason. And I know that now some of the coyote people, they'll try to bait them to come to my house, right? But in any case, I think having regional information, if there's something that I'm disappointed about in the contract, is that I specifically asked when the COG staff was here last time if the COG would then consult with the city to identify or determine threat levels, related to coyotes, and that's definitely not in here. I got a wishy-washy answer from the guy, from Alex, at that meeting. But to me, that's also a valuable service that should be actually included in the contract. I also appreciate the comments of my colleagues too, like just saying participate in a local family youth event could mean exactly just having a booth at Dumplings and Beer. It's coming up on Friday, by the way. Please join us. So I think that education, in the schools is actually, is something that should be added to the contract. And it could be one of these 2 community meetings / trainings, right? Like it says, 2 community meetings, trainings every year within the city of San Gabriel. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily, okay, here's one that certainly does not exclude the schools. Like one of those could be in the schools, but if we wanted more, I think that would be a challenge. Because part of the reason why there aren't as many concrete details is because COG is just trying to get this program up off the ground. And there's been enough interest from enough cities throughout San Gabriel Valley that, means that there's a green light, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they know, in the same level of detail that Councilmember Harrington would like, exactly what the management plan will be, because frankly they haven't started doing anything yet. And so that's why I think it's worthwhile. I mean, it's been, obviously it's enough of a community concern since we've been dealing with it now for several months. For us, the city, to expend our public funds, I think I agree to give it a shot, to give it a try, see what yields of it. We don't like it. We don't think that we're getting the benefit out of it that we would like to see. Then we can terminate it. And that's my position. But I hope that I didn't mean to speak so long just to grandstand or anything like that. I just wanted to let the public know that this has been a long conversation that we've been having, over the course of several months, and we've already gotten, experts. We've already, tried to educate people, so forth and so on. And it seems to keep coming back as somehow something the city needs to address, and I think in being responsive to those community concerns, trying this regional program, might be helpful, and we maybe will learn something that will help us either as a city or information that we can pass on to our private citizens on how and what to do to deal with the issue if they feel that, they individually are threatened, or their pets or their children. Because I agree, I would not want to have my pets or my children threatened by a coyote. But at the same time, there's that's not been my own experience. It's just that I think that those are some of the most heart-wrenching stories that we hear from community members, where they don't feel they can even let their children play in their backyard or let their pets out. But again, here's where they're private citizens. They can also decide how they want to protect their pets, protect their children. So, yes, sir, Councilmember Harrington.
So I just wanted to recap why I think maybe I convinced one other council member. This is a regional issue, and I've maybe you already had that conclusion. I don't know. This is a regional issue. I'll take the credit. Now, this is a regional issue. I've never said it's not a regional issue. That's fine and dandy, but this plan isn't any solution to anything. We're going to get a bunch of data, and there's going to be patterns, but if we're not taking action, or we can't, that doesn't change the state law that we can't do anything about it. So now we know Alhambra has it too. We already know that. Temple City has it too. We already know that. San Marino has it too. We already know that. So what is this data going to do for us that we're paying for? And one thing that really came up to me is, just like Jason said with Sue, is we have to take care of our own selves. We have I don't know what information they're going to provide to our residents that's not already on our website. I went through it 2 or 3 times now. We have a lot of pages on coyotes just on our website. If someone really came there and looked for, you in the search coyote, you'll find 6 different things there. It links to YouTube videos. There's our management plan. So this plan doesn't really do anything because we have all this data, but so what? We're paying for it, but so what? We can't do anything with it. You can't take action.
I'd like to respond in part just that, again, I feel like if we are seeing, because some people have come to us saying that that coyotes are becoming more aggressive. And if that's true, I think that is something that, is a public safety concern. So, but I don't want to I've never seen it myself. I don't want to make those kinds of decisions in a vacuum. If regionally we are seeing coyotes being more aggressive towards humans, then I think there's something else going on. That's not a natural behavior. So that's why, to me, being able to also access or consult with the COG as a clearinghouse of this information to know or identify if a threat level exists that we need to do something else. That's again where I feel like there's value in doing this agreement.
And I agree with you, because that's why I asked, are these real-time databases that the public can go to? So if something happened in February and the report comes to us in October, what good does that do the public? If it's available all the time and it's a website, someone can see, hey, where are the hot spots? Where should I be, wary to go? That's not answered here.
Well, I believe their plan is actually to launch a new website with a lot of information. And if council moves the recommended action this evening, we will be having a kickoff with their staff and our staff to kind of talk about some of those timelines and implementation strategy, because I think it would be important to know exactly what level of information will be available on their website, and making sure that our existing information also links to that. So any statistical information they start to update and provide, that our residents have immediate access to it.
Yeah, so it's a public website that anyone could go to. That's what my question was. Can anyone just go?
I believe that will be their plan.
Yes.
My thought would be that as a participating agency, there may be levels of information that we can extract kind of on the back end. I think the mayor made a point earlier that I'd like to emphasize. Because it's a new program, I don't think they've gotten that far just yet. I think they're waiting to see how many cities are willing to enter into the regional plan with them, so they can iron out those details. So as that information becomes available, and if we move forward with participating, we will make sure that our residents are aware, council is aware, and we're providing that information to the public.
So one last item, I think if we are going to do an educational, it should be specific. So maybe we have like all the elementary schools come to the Mission Playhouse for an event, and it's educational at one time. So we aren't going to every single school. We can get all the kids one day. I'm assuming that's the type of thing I would be looking for, not a quote-unquote event.
Well, I think that I thought that was actually a really good point to go back to them with and say, could one of those community meetings be, or whatever we're doing with the schools, instead of doing it with the school officials, there may be a greater benefit, because we can do something with the school officials on our end. I think getting to the children and getting information to all the families would be probably pretty relevant. So doing something like that, maybe there's an opportunity to have some wiggle room with the meetings that are currently identified in the agreement as it stands, to be able to do something like that.
Thank you.
I think I'd like to follow up on that, though, because there are 8 schools within the San Gabriel Unified School District, and also 1 in the Garvey School District. So, having to just have one school would not be necessarily.
No, I said all the schools have one event, like the Mission Playhouse. So bring them all there for a field trip.
Well,
That'd be a really good time to do it.
It would be, although I think
I'm talking elementary,
Vice
'cause I
Mayor
don't-
Menchaca knows that the collective bargaining agreement with the teachers particularly also lays out a lot of like detail about how many minutes they're supposed to be teaching and so forth.
Well, this could be instructional.
It's instructional, but it's not curricular in that sense. Let me offer a different possibility, which is that last Tuesday I did the State of the City, and one of the programs we touted was our school community engagement team, the SCET team, in which every single one of our police officers is now a school resource officer who's assigned to particular schools. And if there's something that we want to try to do as part of our programming, and I'm looking to the chief to see if this is something that is possible, if it's possible to include information, about if it's possible to include information regarding how to deal with coyotes in any of our presentations by the school resource officers in the SCET team, when they're actually out there in the schools and educating on other matters as well.
That was good.
That was all right, right? Recovery. Absolutely, and it's one of the things that we're working with as an executive, or working together as an executive team to make sure that we're kind of spreading that message. The SCET team and the rest of the Community Engagement Bureau really do have the opportunity to pass information along, so it's a vehicle we can use on a regular basis to kind of feed some of that information to folks, especially since some of those issues have occurred on campuses within the school district.
Okay, thank you, Chief. So I think I'd like to make a motion. This might be a little bit complicated, so bear with me. I'd like to move the approval of the recommended action on the condition that they include an item in the response in section 2A, the responsibilities of the COG, that they will consult with the city as reasonably requested by the city in determining and identifying and determining any threat levels related to coyotes. I'm open to the suggestion also by. Yeah, and I think I'm sorry. I'm just gonna stop with the conditional approval on being able to consult with respect to identifying and determining threat levels. That's my motion.
Can I add something to it?
Okay, I'll entertain.
It's a technical thing.
Okay.
The staff report, the contract as presented is set up for the city manager's signature. The staff report should have also requested that you instruct the city manager to sign it as opposed to the mayor. And so I would, based on the way the contract's set up, I would recommend that your motion also include that instruction.
I accept the friendly amendment.
And I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Motion and second. Let's go to the board.
Motion passes by a vote of 3-2, with Councilmember Costanzo and Councilmember Harrington voting against the motion.
Okay, thank you. Next item, please.
Item B, roles and responsibilities of the Historic Preservation and Cultural Resource Commission. Presentation will be made by Planning Manager Tracy Steinkruger.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council members. Tracy Steinkruger with the Community Development Department. The staff report before you this evening responds to a City Council request for information regarding the roles and responsibilities of the Historic Preservation and Cultural Resource Commission which for the sake of brevity, we're just going to call the Historic Preservation Commission. I'm going to try and keep my presentation brief tonight. I know we have commission members in attendance as well as members of the public who would like to speak on the matter, but I did want to provide a quick recap. Back in August of 2017, the Historic Preservation and Cultural Resource Ordinance was adopted by the City Council. Adoption of the ordinance capped a multi-year effort to both modernize and strengthen the San Gabriel zoning code with regard to historic preservation. The ordinance resulted in the creation of, amongst other things, the Historic Preservation and Cultural Resource Commission. We've detailed their roles and responsibilities as prescribed by the ordinance on page 2 of your staff report this evening. The commission membership was first recruited in the spring of 2018. Commission members were appointed by the City Council in the summer of 2018, and the council was seated for the first time in December of 2018. The ordinance requires that the commission meet on a quarterly basis at minimum. Since they were originally seated in December of 2018, the commissions met 4 additional times. They're likely to meet twice in the month of October, and again in December of this year, so more or outpacing the minimum requirement. The early focus of the commission was on education and training largely, selection of subcommittees for work on local designations, and drafting the certified local government application. Some of the next agenda items for October and December include reviewing portions of CEQA documents relevant to historic preservation and/or cultural resources for proposed development projects here in the city, specifically in the Mission District, as well as modifications to buildings in the Mission District, such as the Arcade Building, the recently designated Mission Playhouse, and other buildings that could potentially be eligible for designation. One of my early comments to stakeholders or proponents for the update to this ordinance and to the commission was that the implementation of this ordinance is a marathon. It is not a sprint. It wasn't going to be done in 3 months or a year. I even felt at the time that implementing the ordinance in 5 years was extremely ambitious, taking into consideration what funding resources we readily had available and what the staffing resources are within the planning division given the current project load. The ordinance specifies preparation of a historic context report or statement and community-wide inventory for the purpose of identifying properties that are eligible for designation. However, preparation of both documents comes at a sizable cost. $25,000 has been budgeted for preparation of the historic context report, which is likely to fund preparation of the document only in part. An inventory is likely to cost a great deal more. Based on estimates that we've been provided by other jurisdictions and consultants, the cost associated with an inventory can range from as little as $75,000 to as much as $125,000 or more, depending upon the depth of work involved and the amount of reporting that's done by the consultant. There are grant funds that are out there and available to assist with preparation of these documents, but it's a process. To be eligible for much of the funding that exists at the state level, designation as a certified local government is needed. Preparing the CLG application is a goal, both for staff and the commission, by the end of this calendar year. It then goes through a review process with the state, and if we do receive the designation as a CLG, then we're eligible to apply for the grant funding when it becomes available. But in the interim, we're relying on an internal process and relying on the resources that we have readily available in an effort to determine what items do and do not need to be routed to the commission, either in an advisory capacity or as a discretionary board. Most notably, we're relying on existing research that we have at City Hall, environmental research and review that's been completed for past projects, and on the architectural and historic preservation expertise that we have available to us through our consulting historic preservation team. Onyx Architects has provided architectural assistance and historic preservation services to the city for quite a few years now. Members of their staff are educated and trained on Secretary of Interior standards for historic preservation, and their team provides services to our city and to others, such as Section 106 review, preservation surveys, and preservation master plans. So I wanted to kind of give the council a quick example of how the process works right now in the absence of a community-wide survey where we can just look up an address and quickly come to the conclusion of, does this need to be routed to the commission or not? The first is being presented with an actual proposed project, in this case a single family home that may be looking at demolition in whole or part in some form of construction. If the home meets the general age thresholds, 45, 50 years, the ballpark age thresholds we use, Planning Division staff and the city's historic preservation architect confirm through research, examination, and through existing documents whether or not the home is potentially eligible for designation. If the determination is made that the potential does exist, we tend to do more research, more documentation, and would route the item to commission for consideration. This is a very informal process. It reduces cost, both to the city and also to homeowners in this instance. And it also reduces the impact for time delays to a proposed project, especially to projects where eligibility is already questionable to begin with. We have found that the process works well given the existing staffing levels, given what our existing workload is, both in terms of residential, commercial, and industrial projects. And it has modest ramifications for single family projects where sometimes they're making a simple addition to the rear of the home or where they're doing an entire demolition and the construction of a 2-story home. There we go. Some commission members have suggested the possibility of expanding the roles and responsibilities beyond what's prescribed by the current ordinance in the absence of a community-wide survey. In our staff report tonight, what we didn't want to do was put words on the page that didn't properly convey the attitudes of the commission. So we tried to address this in big, broad brushstrokes based on what we've heard so far. We have commission members that are here tonight that can certainly opine their opinions on the matter better than staff at this point, and probably more articulate. But one of the things that we've heard is perhaps having more review of projects within the parameters of the Mission District area, the ability for the chair to refer projects to the commission. There does exist a process similar to this in the city of South Pasadena's Historic Preservation Ordinance. A potential review of all projects that involve wholesale demolition of a structure, whether it be residential or commercial, notably if it meets certain age thresholds. And then potentially requiring standardized forms for all projects that could be routed to the commission, I think with some particular sensitivity to single family projects, so that projects that the commission feels need to be routed to them could be set aside and placed on a different pathway. In the staff report, we provided multiple discussion points for the council to take into consideration. We surveyed some of the neighboring communities to get a feel for who has a program. Is it big? Is it little? Does it not exist at all? And I think you can quickly see cities with bigger programs tend to have bigger community development departments or planning divisions. Communities with smaller programs or no programs, I think are commensurate with smaller planning divisions or community development departments. We've heard some concerns expressed by the development community just in knowing that there was going to be a council discussion on the matter, concerns expressed about how it may impact the processing of existing projects that are in the pipeline right now, or how it could impact future projects that are on the horizon. There was a discussion about impacts to the overall implementation of the ordinance and how increasing the roles and responsibility and or need for review could potentially slow down the long-term implementation of the ordinance. Impacts to projects regarding cost and timing in the form of project review and fees, potential city architect deposits or historic preservation deposits that would need to be paid, and what that means for the timing of improvements and project processing. Looking at how the existing resources in the planning division may or may not best facilitate a potential expansion of the roles and responsibilities. Right now, including myself, we have 4 full-time staff. Out of curiosity, today I asked each of them to give me a list of the number of, or a total number of active projects that they have. Our 2 assistant planners right now average about 35 projects, active projects between the 2 of them. That doesn't include the number of projects that they will process and put to bed in a single month, which they do a lot for smaller projects like sign permits and small site plan reviews. Our 2 assistant planners also work at the public counter 35 hours a week in addition to their project load. Our senior planner has 20 projects. I myself am still processing projects, especially the larger ones requiring environmental impact reports or more robust CEQA documents. Right now I've got about 5 to 7 myself. And then we also talked about the timing of implementation, and again the concept of it being a marathon versus a sprint, and how implementing the ordinance and kind of crossing off some of those short-term to-dos can be done. But to roll out a community-wide inventory in some of the communities I've worked for in the past, it's a long-term process that doesn't evolve overnight. There we go. Our recommendation tonight was pretty simple. We asked that the City Council discuss the role of the Commission and provide direction to staff. Should that direction, though, require an amendment to the existing ordinance, staff would recommend that the Council provide some pretty specific direction when they're initiating the preparation of a zone text amendment. We're looking for clear parameters and thresholds for review, getting a feel whether any process should be advisory or discretionary. We'd like to provide as much certainty to the development community, whether it be residential or commercial, as much as possible in the short term and long term. And then also, I think we'd like some direction to do some community engagement as part of any future zone text amendment, if only because everything that has been discussed with the development community so far has been about the possibility of a zone text amendment. I think we'd want to be able to re-engage with all impacted parties if and when the potential for a zone text amendment becomes real, so we can get some feedback on the impacted community as to how impacted parties would feel about a zone text amendment. So to that end, staff's available. I believe members of the Commission are here this evening who'd like to speak. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
We do have some speakers request cards, so we will take these comments first for this item and then go into council questions and discussion. First is Chuck Myers. Mr. Myers, would you like to?
Well, I just won't even take 3 minutes, I don't believe. And you can all thank me for that. You know, where I come from, when you're starting a brand new project, and this is a brand new project, you appeal to the authority. And in this case, I think it's really salient because we've already had LA Conservancy say that this is the best historical context report historical preservation report it's had to date. So you appeal to the authority, and what that means in our case, I think you have very few people you're appealing to. I mean, the person on staff that has the best capability for this kind of a project is Tracy. I mean, in my opinion, and the chair of the commission has pretty good background too. So why don't we leave the bulk of the responsibility with those two in the early going, because they have the knowledge. To give you an example, I think it's very important you have in the early going again the authority, the who's got the most authority. We have 5 commissioners, but I don't know too much about the background of the rest of them. I've looked at the chair, and she's got pretty good background. She's had experience with I think she's had experience with SHPO and with other entities that work for that work in this area. But with that approach, then you could not get too far out there if you've got too many people looking at things and trying to recommend things. To give you an example, I recently, a while back, my track was reviewed, my track of cabins, 94 cabins, I'm the president, that was reviewed for historic preservation recently, 2013. And a cabin owner wanted to know what he had to do to get on the list. And when I called Schipul, and what they said was they're looking for architects that have experience at this particular project. I lied. I took more than 3 minutes. I'm sorry. Anyway, that's my point. I think we should keep it down in the beginning and not have too many fingers in the ointment.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Apologies for that too. Is the 30-second warning, is that not working right now? Because I think normally the light turns yellow and then red, stuff like that. Okay. No. Sure. Why don't we do that for the remainder if the technology itself is not, working with us. Next speaker's request card is Senya Lubasic, said chair of the commission. Thanks for waiting, Senya.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. Senya Lubasic. I live at 116 North Del Mar. And I do want to speak to you tonight as chair of, and I'm so grateful for the abbreviation, the Historic Resource Commission. It's the wordiest commission we've got. I want to start by saying that our ordinance is good, it is strong, and it is clear. That it has indeed felt like a marathon already to arrive at the point of having this ordinance, but that we really ought to be very proud of the fact that it was a very collaborative, inclusive, and comprehensive effort that resulted in an award-winning ordinance. Our commission has been seated for 1 year. We are making baby steps, and I will say a lot of times it feels like growing pains. I'm much more conditioned to the sprint and would love to be farther down the road than we are, but they're necessary baby steps. We've been benefiting from training both in-house and through the California Preservation Foundation. We are making progress towards an RFP for our context statement. We also are moving towards certified local government status. These are the necessary steps that we are taking, and they will continue to move us forward. Preservation works best as a cooperative effort between staff, commission, and the community, and I think that I feel confident in speaking on behalf of my fellow commissioners and saying that we're committed to that end, to a cooperative and collaborative effort. Some things that have been very helpful in this past year towards that end is when staff directs our attention to items of interest on the Planning and Design Review Commissions. Right now that is an avenue where we can see what's happening in the city and keep ourselves aware. Another thing that's been very helpful is the publication that Council requested, I believe it's quarterly, for updates on projects that are proposed and underway in the city. Again, that's another way we can educate ourselves. Residents who bring resources to our attention is very valuable, and the San Gabriel Historical Association in partnership has been very valuable. As much, again, as I would like to be further down the road, I do think we are doing good work, but I would like to draw your attention to a few things that are in your staff report. First, when you look at attachment B, I hope that one of the things that stands out to you is the importance of the inventory in establishing what we have purview in terms of review. If you look at those first 4 items, those are all things that require the inventory to be in place. We do want to serve as an additional resource for the city staff and the preservation architect. And in terms of the suggestions that were brought forward in the staff report, the one suggestion that truly did get resounding exclamation from my fellow commissioners was having projects within the boundaries of the Mission District specific plan brought to our commission for review. I just have a few concluding comments.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Make them. Thank you. The Missions District Specific Plan was written with direction and guidance from the Secretary of the Interior Standards, and as such, I think meets the burden of a de facto inventory. And therefore, projects that happen within those boundaries, I feel, are within the purview of our commission to review. I am terrifically grateful to have the opportunity to talk with you about the ordinance. I do think it's appropriate to revisit the ordinance and to check in on how it's functioning, but I also feel that at this time, a zone text amendment is not necessary. I think it is premature to start changing the roles and responsibilities of our commission if we don't have the necessary tools of our context statement and our inventory in place, which ultimately are what set our responsibilities and roles into to progress. So I think that after we have this, then it would be an appropriate time to come back and gauge how the ordinance is functioning, and I think we would find that we're celebrating it for being the good ordinance that it already is. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. We just have two more request cards that came in. First, Marcelo Vavala.
Good evening, Council. Marcello Vavala with the Los Angeles Conservancy. We wanted to reach out tonight and, as the ordinance is coming up for review, to take a moment to kind of talk about the milestones that the city has achieved so far. 1 year with the commission being seated, which is a great milestone. And some of the things that I hear are on their pipeline are the historic context report, and also the CLG application that they are working on. So those will be great things to have in place. That's always great for moving the program along. And as we heard earlier from Tracy, historic preservation program, the steps in implementing that definitely do take a while, and this is a young program, but we think that the city is doing well with the best practices that are outlined in the historic preservation ordinance. The other thing I wanted to mention is with the talk about the ZTA, I would say just from our experience at the Conservancy and working with other jurisdictions throughout the county, that this is probably a little too soon to consider that. Usually it's more momentous occasion to open up an ordinance, and I think that some of the things that have been discussed here might be able to be handled with some sort of policy framework. The Conservancy can also serve as a resource for technical assistance, and with our experience working with other jurisdictions, I know some have created flow charts or other visual aids that have helped describe some of the process that a commission might take on project review. So those are other options to provide further clarification. And lastly, I just want to say that the Conservancy does look forward to continued serving as a technical assistance and as a resource, and we're very pleased with the ordinance that you have in place, and the Conservancy, of course, awarded a preservation award to that recently. So we think that it's a great ordinance that follows best practices. Very good thing that you have. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, Mr. Vavala. Last is Paul Padilla.
Okay, yeah, I want to echo what Marcello said, that I think it's wonderful that we have this historic preservation ordinance finally, this update to our then landmark 1965 one, second in the LA region. Of course, we are first always in the LA region as far as our founding goes. So I love history. I think we all do here, and we want to preserve it. And I believe that at this time, I agree that I don't think a ZTA is needed. I would like to see that historic context statement and that inventory get done and lead our way, including for funding. One of the things mentioned in the staff report was lack of funding. Once we get those two items, we'll be eligible for more funding, more grants. So I look forward to more money for our city and for this ordinance. But yeah, no, I invited Marcello here tonight because I want us to continue working with the LA Conservancy. I'm a longtime member and a longtime fighter for historic preservation. And so I wanted him to take a look at this and continue to be a resource for us, for staff and for council. So yeah, I don't want to see this watered down. I think that's the big danger. As I've mentioned previously, when we discussed the first time redeveloping the historic Mission District, that developers may be nice people, but they're not our friends. We can be friendly to them, with them, but they're obviously looking to make money, and we have to defend the interests of history and our city and our people. So I want to make sure that this historic preservation ordinance continues to do that, and doesn't end up catering to developer interests over historical interests. I think that's pretty much it. But speaking of developers, I've mentioned this too before, that I do not believe any politician should be taking money from developers. And so I hope that doesn't color
30
anything
seconds.
that the council does. That's always something that we need to be mindful of, as citizens and as public servants, that the people come first, not money, and not developers. So yeah, I think that concludes my comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Padilla. So those are all the speakers' request cards we have for this item. Is there any other member of the public who would like to speak to the City Council about this item? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public comment portion for this item and council questions and discussion. Anyone like to begin? Councilmember Leo.
Tracy, please. So, yeah, just echo to the comment that from the public regarding the zone tax amendment. Why do we have to do that at this moment? Do you know?
The council can initiate a zone text amendment at any point in time. It can be done tonight, it can be done 3 months from now, it can be done a year from now. Based on some of the comments we heard from staff, I think a good first step in the process, and we had planned on doing this, was on October 5th, or 15th, excuse me. Is it the 5th or the 15th? Thank you. The 15th, the council is going to consider the Mission District's specific plans, comprehensive feasibility analysis. And it was our intention to both invite the commission to attend that evening's discussion on the matter and forward them a copy of the council packet as it relates to that item. So they would have all of the presentation materials and staff report as well. So I think that's a good first step to kind of kickstarting the process as it relates to the Commission's understanding and involvement of projects happening in the Mission District, both now and potentially in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Moment? No? Would you mind if I just ask a couple of quick questions first? Because mine relate more procedurally, because I see a lot of, as has been mentioned, we're very early in the process of implementing the ordinance. And so I see a lot of different assets, maybe, for lack of a better word, that are yet to be developed. I want to understand the timeline of when and how these different tools or assets work together. So there's the San Gabriel Register of Cultural Resources. There's an inventory. There's the historic context statement. Then there's a historic resource survey. There's the possibility of conservation overlay zones, and also there's the identification of eligible cultural resources. And I'm just taking them, I'm sure that's like completely out of order. I just want to understand what comes first, what things can run in parallel, and what things must run serially.
Okay. Here we go. So we have cultural resources in the city. We have conservation overlay zones, or the potential to establish both within the ordinance. There are criteria that must be met, a designation process that either must be walked to or walked through. If you're designated as a cultural resource, a conservation overlay zone, a historic district, if the Historic Preservation Commission recommends approval and the council approves those designations, they go on the register, or as I call it, the big important list. It has different names in every city as prescribed by the ordinance, but the register is basically a list of anything that has already been designated, or also properties that have been designated as being eligible for individual designation or inclusion in a district, designation or inclusion as part of a conservation overlay zone. So it's creating the eligibility list and having the list in and of itself. In order to do that, it is helpful to have a couple different tools in the toolkit. The first one is a historic resource statement or historic resource report. And what that does is it tends to be a smaller document in scope, and it kind of looks at historic development patterns or cultural resource patterns that exist in your city in big, broad brushstrokes. It basically helps you to identify or narrow the scope of your future studies. So that way, for example, if you've only got $150,000 to work with, but you're a city, say the size of Alhambra, San Gabriel, Pasadena, where to target those resources. Because sometimes you don't need to study the whole city, but where you really need to study is your single family zones or your mission district specific plan area, or you may not have a lot of areas where you've got structures that are worth studying, but you may have a lot of historic signage in your city. Go ahead.
Sorry, Mary, so I think you just called this a historic resource report. Is that the same as the historic context statement?
Historic context statement, it goes by a couple different names, or it can have a couple different names, but it's basically a more global survey that looks at development patterns, helps you kind of narrow where you want to target your study areas in the future. Then you have a community-wide inventory. It can be done at the community-wide level. I've also seen it broken down into parts, where you maybe look at residential areas first, or you look at multifamily areas, you look at commercial areas, corridors. It can be done in one fell swoop. It can be broken down into parts. A lot of times it's broken down into parts, again, to help with implementation and the availability of funding.
If I might ask another
go ahead.
clarification, sorry. So in that, what you were just describing, is that related to the historic resource survey?
The survey, which helps to kind of feed into the inventory. It's
into the inventory.
Yeah,
okay.
They're all certainly related to one another in some way, shape, or form. One certainly bleeds into the next.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed. So I guess what I'm so far registering, so bear with me, is that the historic context statement is a necessary threshold document that helps to define the scope and framework of what comes after it. So that seems to be the initial thing, the very first thing. And then the survey would build upon that. It's a more expensive process, as I see in the staff report, and a broader process. But both of these two tools, if you will, then would help to form the inventory, and then also it goes to inform what can be eligible cultural resources, and then all of that finally, then whatever becomes designated as a cultural resource then becomes the register or the inventory. I'm sorry, I'm still having a little trouble.
You're really close.
Okay.
Once we get the survey done, it's great because then we can input a lot of information into our land management system. So when someone comes to the counter and says, I want to tear down the single-family property or single-family home I just bought and build a 2-story home in its place, we have the ability to type the address into our land management system. A red flag will pop up, and it would say something to the effect of, this got tagged as part of the community-wide survey. It meets the age thresholds. It may be eligible for designation. So what we then do at the staff level is put a pin in the demolition of the project, or the single family home in this case, until it can go through the process that's prescribed by the historic preservation ordinance that may or may not involve the commission, depending upon the scope of work that they're hoping to accomplish on the project site. So the statement feeds into the survey. The survey almost kind of gives us this really comprehensive checklist, sometimes in whole, sometimes in parts, so that when individuals or developers are coming to the planning division wanting to make changes to the property or propose wholesale redevelopment of a site, we can quickly ascertain, hey, based on the scope and magnitude of what you're proposing and what we know based on the inventory, there's a process that you have to go through that may even come before Planning Commission, Design Review Commission, or City Council based on the ordinance that the council's already adopted.
Thank you. I think that at least helps me understand what this process is. And so then, just one last quick one, and then Councilmember Harrington has been waiting patiently. When we first adopted the ordinance, there was talk about a historic resource or cultural resources heat map. Where at all that fits into that process that we just outlined?
I've seen it done at a couple different points in the process. Every city is a little bit different on this. Some cities have localized heat maps that are sometimes prepared in conjunction with development of a specific plan or an update to a specific plan. Sometimes they are done as part of an update to a general plan or a targeted update to the general plan. Sometimes it's an entirely separate implementation task to a historic preservation ordinance. I've seen it done in the very beginning. I've seen it done as part of a community-wide survey. Sometimes these also have a funny way of coming up as part of CEQA analysis for proposed projects. So you may not necessarily get a community-wide heat map, but you might get a map that looks at a certain radius within a proposed project based on the cultural sensitivity within the area. So there's no one answer for how to do this correctly or not. It tends to evolve differently in every city depending upon the circumstances at work in your community.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Harrington?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank staff for letting me spend another Saturday and half a Sunday reading the code once again. Fun times. So I agree with a lot of what Sonia said, but I also disagree because I think we should be actually taking action on these things, where she said we should go slower. I'll just kind of give my background of why I believe that, and the council can agree or not agree. We haven't adequately funded, and we all know that. So without funding, none of this really matters. You can't do anything without money. And it critically affects their ability to, the commission, I'm just going to say commission, I'm shortening it, because I'm not talking about any other commissions unless I say the name of the commission. So it critically affects the commission's ability to do its job. Without an inventory, most of their powers are just vapor. They cannot act without an inventory. So this inventory is actually a key to this ordinance. And I know it's expensive, and I know it's something that's down the line, but I don't believe the way we wrote this code, it would require a zone text amendment to do a lot of the items that the commission wants to do as it pertains to individual projects. And the reason I say that is we put a few little triggers inside the code that allows the commission and the council to take action. One question I have is, have we designated any districts? Has the commission taken any action to designate any districts?
No.
Okay. So when Senya says she wants to use the mission district, it's not designated. So by our own code, we couldn't use it's a quasi-designated, it's kind of designated. We would have to take that action to designate it a district, a historically significant district, in order to use this preservation code for the commission to be able to take power.
I believe so, but I don't want to be quoted on that. I'd need a little bit more time to answer that question.
Okay, I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm just saying some of this is part rhetorical because I've read the code. It does take, it has to be designated before their action triggers. They can't take action and just say it's a designated district. Otherwise, a developer could sue us and say, we had no notice. You've taken no action. How am I going to know this is a designated district? So I'm talking from legal interpretation.
That's correct. There are some proposed projects where we've encouraged developers, especially at play in the Mission District, that it's in their best interest long term to reach out to the Historic Preservation Commission. Some have chosen to do that, some have not. Some are doing it as part of the CEQA process, again, because they've got a neg deck or an EIR that has a section that looks at cultural resources, so you're killing two birds with one stone, basically. And some based on individual project age and or eligibility, based on the internal staff dialogue with our historic preservation architect, we anticipate routing it to the commission for consideration. But like you touched on, just creating that boundary, I don't believe that can be done without going through the districting process first.
Yes, because they have to make specific findings to designate
Correct.
the district, and it has to fit.
And also the process of identifying which properties are contributing versus non-contributing resources, because that binds them to certain requirements or the opposite of that.
And the reason I bring that up is our commission actually has power, discretionary power, not advisory power, in the code for projects in historical districts that right now, like you're saying, we're begging and pleading the developers to please go to work with the commission, and they can just say, nah, we'll just deal with the CEQA process. Whereas they would actually have input. The commission would. They could actually say, these are our conditions. This is what we are asking you to do for your mitigated declaration.
Mitigation measures and conditions of approval are two very different animals, obviously. So for projects that are required, there would be projects that would have to go through more of an advisory process with the commission. Other projects would have to go through more of a discretionary and or decision-making process with the commission. So in an advisory capacity, it's obviously providing guidance that may or may not be incorporated into the project, but would certainly be relayed as part of the discretionary process to Planning Commission, to Design Review Commission, to City Council, if appropriate. In a discretionary process where the commission has that ability, then yes, they could add conditions of approval on the
so
project.
that's under 153.614. It says the approval or denial of the proposed work shall be deemed discretionary under CEQA.
Correct.
So that's why I'm saying it is discretion. That's a significant difference the public may not pick up on, but that really gives our commission its power when it's discretionary, because they're not advising someone else. They're telling this developer, you need to meet these. Now, if they're unreasonable or do something that violates our code, that's one thing. But we're not even allowing them to have any skin in the game. And we've created all this entire code section, and then right now we're really doing nothing with it except for begging and pleading developers. We could have done that without a historic preservation. That's a comment. That's not a question. So that's one thing where I think we could take action without a zone text amendment. That may be something our city attorney could say, because we have, and I'll say why on a lot of these. 153.604 G1M says the commission can perform any other functions that may be designated by resolution or action of the city council. So we could say, until and unless we get this zone text amendment done, or unless we get this survey done, or this registry done, or everything, we can give our commission the powers stated herein as if the register was done on any project meeting these conditions. So we could say a certain number threshold, a certain square footage threshold, if it's an entire tear down, something that gives developers or even people developing a single family home notice. If we can say we have legal notice that we're going to start applying this without the survey, that's something we can do. And what it does is the commission can look at it, and some of this, like you said, it is the community development director in concert with the commission and the preservation historic preservation architect. Between the three bodies, we would be able to figure out this development. We can say clearly it's not in what we would ever probably designate. It's not a huge size. We don't see a significant impact. But right now, I'll give you an example. I would imagine the village eventually will have some sort of overlay over it, or it may even become a district. Right now, someone could come in, tear down a single-family home under our existing code, and ignore the historic preservation ordinance pretty much. I'm not saying 100%, but they could pretty much go through it and just say, it's not designated, it's not already on a registry somewhere. It may be at some point, but we would have to have the community development director come in and put a halt on it. She has the power right now, not the commission. And so I see that as a kind of a flaw, because what if the commission differs with the community development director? Right now they can't say anything about it. Where once that registry is done, or there is a designated district, they would have input. So that's what I'm saying. When you start reading the entire code, and like Jason said, there's a lot of interplay here, and there's a lot of things you have to consider. Once you start getting into it, it's like we're missing a huge amount of responsibilities and powers that we've designated to this commission, and they're just, like I said, they're just vapor at this point. So I really think we could do it without a zone text amendment. That might need a legal opinion from our city attorney, but as I see it, we left ourselves a giant escape clause saying, we know it's going to be a marathon, we know it's not a sprint, but this came up when you said marathon versus sprint. I did not have this rehearsed, but I was thinking this. We have one chance to get preservation right, whether we're sprinting or we're jogging in a marathon. Whether we run by it or jog by it, it's still getting demolished, and it's still not going to be here in the future. And to me, running or walking, if you see something that deserves protection, you protect it. And no running or jogging excuse should matter. We simply can't jog by and ignore historic preservation. We don't get that chance. And I really think we should allow on a complete tear down, or something even on a single family home. I do think the commission should have some sort of input, because right now, because they haven't had the chance to do any historic districts or overlay zones or anything, because I know overlay zones are different than districts. It's a different power. It's a lesser power, but power nonetheless. We can't be myopic, and we can't just say, there's no power here because we haven't funded it, so it's kind of a chicken and the egg. They can't do anything because we can't fund it. We don't have any money to fund anything, so they're never really going to have any power. So I really think we should consider, maybe not all of what the commission wants to do, but especially when we have a project where there's really that gut feeling like, this house has been here a long time. Maybe it is mid-century, maybe it's on the edge of 50 years, maybe it's 45, but maybe there was significant things. Because I can tell you that there are people in this community that know some of the factors here that are not readily apparent to staff. There are people that have lived in this community for generations that'll say, oh yeah, and one of the chiefs of the Gabrielino tribe lived in this house, and this is where they had all their meetings. Staff, that's not apparent. Staff doesn't know that, but it may make that house have historical significance. There's writings that here's the actions they took. There's pictures. There's things that it may not be apparent by looking it up on a GIS system. So we really need to be able to let the commission do their job, have the public attend, and you'll get the people coming out of the weeds that have never come to a council meeting and probably never would, but they have interest in this particular home or this particular building and say, my grandfather did this here. He rode his bike down here and it was this. So those are the type of things we're actually missing. And it may not protect a home from demolition or a building from demolition, but it's good to at least get the input, and someone made a decision rather than a developer just coming through and wiping it off the ground. So there's a lot of other things in here. Like, so when we mentioned the Mission District, we have a few pretty significant condo projects coming up. Because it's not a district, they may go through CEQA, there's going to be some input, but there really is no requirement to go to the commission. I really think we need to think about that. So for example, there's if someone started something like some of these powers here, like a work hold pending a designation, maybe we need to start saying, here's the areas we think we may designate. That may trigger some of this because it's section 153.622. So if we start notifying the public or the development community and anyone that may want to do a house, these are the actual areas that we're looking at, the commission is looking at. We've identified these as potential historic designations, districts. That at least gives some sort of notice that, hey, if the council did have a resolution, that gives a little bit of power so that the commission can actually review something. And there's another little hidden gem in the district in the ordinance and it's regarding initial reviews. And it's 153-614 It says any project referred to the commission by city council, planning commission, design review commission, or city staff. What it's really saying is we can send anything ad hoc if it's not in a district, if it's not designated, but somebody knows something why this should go to the commission, we could do that. That doesn't require a survey. So when I'm saying we can do things without a zone text amendment, that's exactly what I'm saying. We can activate some of these items without a zone text amendment. We should do it mindfully, and we should do it with the commission's input. We should do it with the council's input, with the community development director's input, staff's input, and do it. But that's kind of a blended sprint versus jogging analogy, and it doesn't take a lot of money to do that. There's some staff time. We don't need an expert. We'd probably just take a legal opinion. I really think there is an opportunity here, not to say let's do everything the commission wanted, or let's do nothing, or we have to do a zone text amendment. We don't have to go to any extreme, but I think if we're creative, we think outside the box, we really can make this work on a very limited budget, on a lot of critical thinking and outside the box thinking, and some creativity, and we could actually, let's say, make the commission effective. And start actually doing some of the work that may lead to these studies getting done and these registers getting done. And we're starting the groundwork, and like Mr. Meyer said, not spending a ton of money because we don't have it, but we can invest a lot of brain power into this and have a really good head start. And instead of being on the high end of this at $125,000 or more, we could possibly be on the low end or on the lowest end anyone's ever seen. But it will take a great effort by all the stakeholders. So I'm going to stop there. I think you kind of got the gist of where I'm going with this. I have about 2 more pages, and I don't think anyone wants to hear me talk, but that's the gist of what I'm saying. We really need to be creative, and I don't know that I have any direction, but I really would like a discussion of, hey, what's the low-hanging fruit? What can we take out of here? What's not going to cost us a lot of money? What's not going to require its own text amendment? And maybe it's a combination of the community development director, the commission, and the city attorney getting together and saying, we've really reviewed this, and we spent a whole Saturday and half a Sunday, like some people do, reading these things, and saying, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. Let's do these actions. These are recommended. Council can approve this, and all of a sudden the commission goes from about a 10% effectiveness to about a 50 or 60%. We're not getting to 100. Maybe it's 20. If it's 10 to 20, we're doubled. So without a lot of money and without a lot of effort, just a lot of creative thinking. So that's kind of what I'd like to see from staff.
Thank you, Councilmember Harrington. And I'm actually would like to poll the council. Can we take a recess for a bathroom break, a 5-minute recess, because I'm sorely in need of one. And
so you're glad I didn't do those other 2 pages.
Exactly. That's what the thank you was applying
well,
to.
Well, thank you, Mayor, because according to World Health Organization, the meeting not supposed to be longer than 90 minutes. Otherwise, we all have diabetes, high blood pressure.
So I hear that's as a consensus.
Did you recess this yet?
Hey, I prefer that than having any kind of accident here on the dais. So let's take a 5-minute recess. It's now 9:05. Reconvene at 9:10. Thank you. 11.
We can pretend like it's
10.
All right.
The next item should be pretty quick, right?
Oh, just a second. Well, that's the other so. We have to open the glass. All right. If we could have folks settle down, please. I think that was a much-needed recess, as judged by comments heard on the way and in the restroom. It's now 9. It's now 9:15, and the meeting will now be called back to order. Let's proceed with the Vice Mayor Menchaca.
Okay, thank you so much. I wanted to first applaud the Commission Chair, Senya, and her team that, well, there was 2 of them here earlier. The fact that I know they're working really hard, and it's been only a year, and so we do have to remember they have such a daunting task. I mean, this is something that we should have taken care of decades ago. And now they're trying to move us forward, and so we do need to be patient. Some of the concerns I had was the fact that, we talk about the baby steps, and I want to know the capacity that we as staff have, as well as the commission. If the commission wants to meet more often than quarterly, or more often than just monthly, is that something we can do? Because what I've seen is, talking to other cities, Pasadena is a great example. I mean, they have 4 full-time dedicated historical resource planners. We don't. I think we have 4 in our planning, department. That's it. And so there is a capacity issue. I know when we interviewed the commissioners, we had said quarterly meetings, and then I think we've had some monthly, but if we go bi-monthly, I mean, is that something that our commissioners are willing to commit to? So my question to Tracy is, since, and Sanya, if she'd like to come up, is what are we looking at here? Because, money is an issue, obviously, but just the capacity, what more can our planning commission absorb? And is the current commissioners willing to meet more often and to take on not just the focus on that list, the context statement and the inventory and the survey? I'm just trying to get a feel for where are we right now. It's been a year. We all kind of know, or know each other better. Is there more that we can add on? Tracy and Sanya?
Sure. The answer is probably yes. I think we're probably, the ordinance prescribes quarterly meetings. I think we're going to probably end up getting into a pattern of bi-monthly meetings, or at least meeting 6 times a year. Sometimes there are months, like case in point, November, December, where organically meetings just get canceled because we've got a limited number of commissioners that are available. And this is the same for Planning Commission, Design Review Commission, Historic Preservation Commission. Holidays that fall on days when meetings are regularly scheduled. We're going to deal with that in November because of the Thanksgiving and Veterans Day holidays. Sometimes it's simply room availability, because we've got a decent number of boards and commissions and groups that meet here at City Hall on a regular basis. So a lot of it is just the logistics of making things happen. This month, I think we're going to ask the Historic Preservation Commission to meet a second time in the month of October, because we may need to reschedule the November meeting or cancel the November meeting. Also, to the staff that's needed, both from the city's perspective and our historic preservation consultant staff, to get them in the room for 4 items all on one meeting night won't work, so we need to divvy it up between the 2 so we can get these items looked at in a timely manner. So it's a give and take working with each of the commissions, but I think organically what we're going to end up doing is probably bi-monthly meetings with the commission. And I think we're already starting to, when we meet at the staff level to do agenda forecasts for each of the commissions, we're already starting to see, kind of beginning this month and through the end of the year, more items coming onto their agenda as we go through proposed projects that have environmental review associated with them that needs to be reviewed by the commission, some projects that we'd like to just see previewed in front of commission. Their agenda's going to start to fill up more and more with each passing month. It's just a process of building all of that up.
Have they started looking at any proposed developments, or is that just something that's going to start?
Actually, the first couple items are going to creep onto their agenda this month. Some facade changes to the arcade building just down the street here from City Hall. Some revisions to the exterior of the Mission Playhouse, which has just jumped on the National Register. A condominium project within the boundaries of the Mission District specific plan that had an MND with a pretty robust historical and cultural analysis that was done. Those are the 3, I think, first major substantive items that are crossing their plate. And we know we've got a couple more envisioned for the months ahead. It's just working to get them commission ready.
So what Councilmember Harrington mentioned about the low-hanging fruit, or that some things could already take place without having to go through any zone. I mean, that's already taking place.
Correct. We've already earmarked a couple things that, based on the ordinance, they need to get in front of the commission based on the analysis that's been done by staff and the city's historic preservation architect.
Okay. Could I hear from Senia?
Sure.
Just about capacity and what more your commission can take on?
So to the point of capacity on the part of the commission, as we've looked at the task of creating that context statement, and I'm sorry, Mayor Pooh, we do use a lot of words interchangeably, so I'm talking about that narrative statement that's tracing the broad patterns and the inventory. Tracy asked us, how much are you willing to roll up your sleeves and actually do the work? Can we bring the cost down by working together? We've spun off already 2 task force. So one of the commissioners and I are working on a nomination for the Hayes House. One of the consultants from the ordinance is helping us with that. We also have another commissioner who's created a task force to look at some of those cultural patterns that he feels are being overlooked. So we really are eager to meet. We are eager to work. We are looking forward to taking the ordinance out for a run and seeing how it works. We've gone through training. We're participating in seminars, and we're really eager to put those skills to work. So I think you do have a tremendously energetic group of commissioners who are looking forward to seizing the opportunities. Even simply going through the historic resource reports that have been done as part of CEQA processes. The one that was done for the Trench project is very, very thorough, and it gives a wonderful look at the Mission District. I think it identifies significant districts that we should be paying attention to and moving forward with a significant level of detail. So there's a lot of things that we can use that have already been produced for the city that I would like to see us amass and compile. So there is a great willingness, and I would say try us.
Because I guess I was just kind of leading to the fact that there's already work being done with the design review committee, with the planning commission, that hopefully would it be any additional work when it comes to your commission, that there is already some duplications taking place. I know that for historical there may be additional areas that need to be looked at that maybe the planning commission, design review may not be as interested in. You're zeroing in more on the historical part.
Right. We follow the Secretary of the Interior standards, so there's a set list of criteria that we use in evaluating projects. If we want to determine whether or not something is eligible, there are 3 major criterion that we use to make that determination. So there is a process that's fundamentally unique to our commission that's different than what maybe design review or planning are looking at. Although I do think things like the survey would inform those 2 commissions. It would allow us to partner better together in our aims. I've been going to a lot of design review commission meetings and speaking at hearings, just saying, please remember character and massing. These are 2 things that matter very much in infill projects and that contribute to the historic character of a city. So there is overlap, although our purview is intended really for the designation protection of those resources.
But you are doing, it sounds like you've gone beyond the scope. You're looking at projects now, even though, your marching orders are here, but you are doing other things that are protecting the integrity of many of our buildings so they don't get destroyed. It sounds like between staff and maybe your commission, you're identifying those type of buildings or projects that we should be looking at.
And I would say that's functioning primarily as concerned resident, far more than an active role in the commission. It is going and hopefully providing something for planning and design review to think about as they're making their determinations. I think one thing that's overlooked that Councilmember Harrington brought up is that they do have the right to send things to us, that if they look at a project and would like us to review it, they can refer it to our commission. That hasn't happened yet. And I would be happy to look at a project that they sent our way. It will be really interesting in October to start looking at those projects and to start looking at CEQA as it pertains to some of the developments that are taking place. So that'll be our first real work under the purview provided by the ordinance.
Well, I guess I'm just happy to see that there is some collaboration. I mean, that you're starting to move on to the projects, because you talked about baby steps, and that's what it's going to take to look at a few, and then from there, I'm sure the scope will continue to expand.
But I would also say the process of getting to the ordinance really raised the radar of preservation for the other commissions. And so when you do have a residential tear down, you have the design review very mindful that that was something that did cause great concern amongst the community. And the process that's in place now post-moratorium is much more robust than it was prior to that.
Well, that's good to know. Also, the fund, well, I'm not sure if, well, actually, I'll start with you, Senya, because you've been extremely proactive in this area with regard to funding. You know, we have a very tight budget. Any additional monies that we could assign would have to come from general fund. I mean, that's just the reality. But I remember when we were putting the ordinance together, you know, we were very excited of the possibilities of having grants and opportunities to really fund this program or this ordinance. Is everything kind of on a hold until we can get this context statement, this inventory, or is there something we can be doing right now to try to just get additional funding?
Those two pieces are the major tools that we need for our toolkit. So those are the things that then create, I think threshold is a good word to use, or at least a base that we can build on for the designation of resources. That's not to say that you can't be designating without those. It doesn't completely handicap you. When it comes to funding those, some of the things that I'm very proud of our commission in terms of what we're making progress toward is the certified local government. That does allow us to apply for grants, which I think can be very helpful in terms of getting funds that might move us along. We may not get funding to do an entire inventory for the city, but we could target areas, as Tracy was saying, and work that piecemeal. And I think identifying particularly sensitive areas or areas that we feel are at risk might be a good way to approach that. So there are a lot of avenues. We are not doomed without those two pieces. We can find ways to work our way towards them, and I think our commission is terrifically committed to do that. Ideally, though, we do get our context statement in place, and then we follow that within a few years with the inventory coming into place. And then we really do have what we need to do our job.
And what's the timing again for completing the context statement?
So we're envisioning putting out an RFP with basically a not to exceed amount of $25,000 before the end of October.
This October?
Correct.
Okay.
For the statement. With the idea being that we'll probably give firms 8 weeks just because it's the holidays to respond. We're basically going to say, okay, if the not to exceed is 25, what can we accomplish with that in terms of a statement? I have seen statements performed at various points in my career of various depths and magnitude, and I think we'll get back a lot of different answers to the question that we propose in the RFP. I think we'd like to make a submittal within 30 days and move forward with their work. Based on what I'm hearing from other communities and consultants right now, it'd probably be a 3 to 5 month process to put a draft of the document together, and then it'd need to be, obviously, it'd need to go through the roadshow process with the Historic Preservation Commission, the Historical Society, other interested stakeholders, probably at a community meeting and the like. It's a policy document, so it needs to, for approval, get in front of Historic Preservation Commission, probably Design Review and Planning Commission as well before making its way to council. Senya touched on this and she's 100% correct. In terms of making ourselves more competitive when it comes to the grant funding that exists at the state level, the CLG application is paramount. I have seen cities go from not being in the hunt at all whatsoever to in receipt of grant funds the very next calendar year by way of getting that CLG application approved. And one of the items at our next meeting is kind of going to be a study session about that application. State officials are very kind in this situation to review draft applications, provide feedback to city staff and commissions when they're in draft form so they can be revised prior to final submittal. It's a pretty straightforward review process, unlike historic designations, this tends to be a little bit more streamlined. A lot of what they're confirming is the progress that the city has already made in its pursuit of a stronger historic preservation platform. Also evidence that documents that the commission has met on a regular basis, and some of the items that they're doing as part of the commission work, making sure that all checks out. It's basically a process of making sure that your historic preservation program is getting its sea legs before they go through the process of awarding grant funding for tasks that you want to take on at the local level. And then also, if we were to receive that funding, there's requirements for documentation to the state to show that we're actually using it in the way that we described or very close there too. So I think we're going to probably see a lot of movement in the first 2 quarters of the next calendar year.
So estimated completion date would be June, July?
The hope was to submit the CLG application before the end of the calendar year, and get at least the historic context statement a good chunk of the ways down the road. I don't know if it's going to be approved by the end of this next fiscal or this fiscal year, but I certainly think we'll have it well on its way to being in front of all the bodies that need to review and or approve it.
Okay, well, I just wanted to applaud everyone's efforts. I mean, this is something that defines us. This is part of our story, as Mayor Pooh would say. It is a critical part, and if there's any way we can, find that funding, because at the end of the day, as it's been said before, it's unfortunately that's what it takes. But having commissioners, having planning staff that is so versed and so well knowledged in this area it's a tremendous asset. It's priceless. So thank you to all of you for all the work you've been doing. That's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Costanzo.
Thank you, Mayor Pooh. I am so proud of how far we've come to date. I commend both the commission for your countless hours and staff also for getting us to where we are today. I think it's has to be a priority of this city council in our next budget to make these tools, to be able to fund these tools that you need to continue this process. It is newly, you've just been on the commission since December, and you have come so far and accomplished so much. So again, I can't tell you how proud I am, but as Councilmember Harrington has said, I think we can be creative in finding ways to maybe not do the zone text amendment quite this early, but I think we can be creative with staff in finding ways maybe to implement some of the suggestions that the commission has put before us, and and make things maybe happen more quickly than are happening now. So again, I just commend all of you for working so hard and bringing it so far, and again for continuing to protect the historic value of what we have in the city, which means so much to all of us. So thanks again.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Leal, would you have to make any comments?
Well, actually, I just interested in what's the survey going to look like? Are we going to hire a real good consultant and he can identify all the buildings, or the list that recommended by the commissioners? Because everyone has a different criteria, and so, for instance, one reason, I'm just throw out this example. For instance, the corner of Del Mar and Valley, and remember there is a cement sign, and it was considered, historical, but then we dig into it, and it said, well, no, it was built in the 70s, so it's not that old, and it's not that significant. So it took a while, for our planning and also design review to come to the conclusion that we don't have to reserve that. And so, it's going to cost a lot of staff time, but also developers funding, because every time when they delay it, it's going to cost them more. So my question, okay, is how can we qualify this surveyor? How are we going to develop this list?
The survey can be as intense or lack thereof as the city dictates. If you're going to spend the money, though, I'd prefer to only do it once and get the level of reconnaissance that we need so that when homeowners and developers come to the planning division counter, we can articulate what rules and regs they're subject to, what processes they need to go through, and the like. You bring up a good point, though, with signage. A community-wide inventory, 9 times out of 10, doesn't go down so much to the level as looking at signage. Some cities have looked at signage separately as part of a historic sign survey. In fact, one of the first grants that a former organization that I was employed with ever received from the state following their CLG status was to do a historic sign survey, where the consultants drove all of the main commercial corridors and identified signage that was eligible for designation. And much like there was a community inventory for structures, residential and commercial, there was also a inventory that existed for signage, so that when a business or developer proposed a project that might result in the removal of signage that was on that list, it got earmarked the same way that a structure might. There, in the absence of a sign survey, there's also the CEQA process that should and could catch historic signage when it's proposed to be torn down. The example that the Commission actually assisted with a great deal here very recently was the San Gabriel bowling alley sign at the Rubio Village project site. As part of the environmental review that was done in, I think it was between 2005 and 2007 ballpark, the environmental review work, for reasons that admittedly I cannot contemplate, did not prescribe a mitigation measure requiring preservation either on-site or off-site of that sign. Regardless of whether it rose to the level of being historically significant, it was acknowledging that the sign had some community value, and as part of some parameters that exist in the zoning code, could have been designated as having special significance, and a mitigation measure or a condition of approval might have been warranted. If the same project were proposed today, that's a pitch I wouldn't have let go by. It certainly would have resulted in a condition on the project to require it be incorporated into the project, or at least reincorporated elsewhere into the community, working with the Commission, working with city staff. In the 11th hour, with the help of the chair and the Commission, we were at least able to have the sign relocated and preserved elsewhere in the Southern California region. I don't think it was the idyllic way we wanted to tackle things, but in light of the resources we had available, that was what we could accomplish, and that's what we wanted to do. So to kind of answer your question, a community inventory, it can be as specific as we want or as non-specific. But I think in a community like San Gabriel that has the plethora of historic resources, architectural resources, cultural resources, tribal resources, we'd look for more depth, with the understanding that we may have to circle back later on with even more review as it relates to the areas of the community that we really need to zero in on.
So when we develop this list from the commissioner and also the consultant, does the council have to approve the list?
Not necessarily. The list of properties that are eligible for designation can stand alone without review and approval by the council. The process becomes taking homes or structures that are eligible and walking them through the designation process. And that's a real collaborative effort between the property owner, the commission, and city staff. Because there's a process that has to be walked through to make a determination or a recommendation. Is this eligible? How much so? Does it meet one of the 3 criteria? And if so, how? And then we need to route that through the process that involves the Historic Preservation Commission, and the City Council. So some of those designations you have and will continue to see come before you. And if those properties are designated, they may come back again later still with a Mills Act contract that the property owner seeks to enter into. In the past, I think sometimes the council has seen those two processes coupled together. I think ideally moving forward, because of the amount of work that's required for both, separating them might be a better fit. That's a to be determined answer that I think we'll figure out as the process continues to evolve.
So for the case that property owners agree, say, hey, this is part of a preservation properties, and they can apply for Mills Act and property tax reduced, and they'll be happy to do that. However, there's a group of property owners, they don't want to be identified, their property is as historical. So when it comes to the dispute, so how are we going to solve the problem?
So some cities don't allow for compulsory designation. They require the consent of the property owner before the process gets too far down the road. In San Gabriel, the way that the ordinance is structured, it does allow for compulsory designation, so we could bring forward an application of a property that is eligible to be placed onto the register. Certainly property rights are something that need to be taken into consideration by the commission and by the council, but ultimately the decision is yours.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Tracy and council members. I just wanted to thank everybody for the very thoughtful discussion. Thanks to staff, Tracy and Armine. Thanks to all my colleagues here on the dais, and thanks to Senya and the commission for being involved and engaged in this process. What strikes me, and I feel like also I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about the process, what the commission is doing. What strikes me is how much there is on the commission's plate already, and how much further there is to go, with this nascent commission. And I think, in answer to the question of should we change things, in my mind, one, the commission already has a lot of work yet to do, and that it should stay focused on that. Two, it does seem to already be serving some of these expanded roles as part of the CEQA process in for various projects. Three, I worry about duplication of efforts. I worry about additional burden on staff time in doing anything expanded at this point. Four, it is such a nascent commission that as was mentioned by pretty much every single speaker in the public comment portion for this item, it's premature to try to change things at this time. At some point, I think it's encouraging to hear that maybe the draft historic context statement, I believe it's called, might be something that's put out there and completed by, say, May or June of 2020, because it feels like that's a gating item. That's the very first step towards us actually engaging in this process. Fifth, I think, of course, the council, we can do anything we want if three of us can agree on it. But the question is whether or not it's a good idea. And in my mind, it's not a good idea to try to expand the role of a nascent commission that hasn't even kind of completed the sort of groundwork that it's supposed to do, and to put it in a position where it's actually, would be doing things absent the data, absent the actual information that is the reason there is this process of having the historic context statement, of then doing the survey, and then proceeding on with things that are eligible, cultural resources, as well as putting them onto the register, the inventory, considering conservation overlay zones, so forth and so on. So that is my feeling about it at the moment. That before before we get too far ahead of ourselves, that we really need to like establish the building blocks of what this means in our community, and so it would be my personal feeling that we allow the commission. I mean, and this is actually really kudos to the commission and to the staff for getting so much done in a short period of time, and really without any funding attached to it from in the last budget year. So now I guess we have the $25,000 allocated to be able to do the historic context statement, and I feel like we need to stay the course and make sure that that gets done first, and it's done as thoughtfully and as well as it possibly can be before we talk about other things. And again, it feels to me that the commission is already reviewing certain other projects because it's already required under CEQA or as part of a CEQA process for certain sensitive properties, or that, and so that. So in other words, I feel like it's if it's not broken, why fix it? And also that it's for me, in my personal life and also in my professional life, I like to try to get the basic part done first. It's kind of like the 80-20 rule. You can where you can get if you start distracting or taking away from the focus. And again, I'm kind of to go back to even the strategic plan that I talked about at the State of City last Tuesday. You have to be able to focus on the things that are most important and right in front of you before you start saying yes to other things. And so that would be my thought process and position on it. Can we take I was taking notes, copious notes here. Can we take a sort of poll the council? I think I heard from Councilmember Harrington that he would like to look into be able doing resolutions to expand the role of the commission. I think that was also heard that from Councilmember Costanzo. Is that correct?
I actually said to activate, not to expand. They already have the powers, they're just not able to use them because we don't have those documents. So in some cases, I'd really like to just have staff and the commission work together to say, what can we do? It's already in the ordinance. We're not trying to say new powers. They're powers that can't be exercised yet, but that we would have to notify the development community, homeowner, that we want to do these. And
on what basis, though, would that be activated? Because it seems like without having the historic context statement and survey, it could become arbitrary.
I'll tell you. Well, it is already arbitrary in the code, because right now it says any council member, any commissioner, any council member, staff can refer any project to the commission right now. Community development could do it. The other commissions can do it. I could do it individually without the rest of the council. It says a council member can do it. I could refer every project right now if I wanted to. It would be silly. But so that's what I'm saying is don't leave it up to council to say, I think this project and that project need to go to the commission. I really think it should be, let's put something out there. We do a resolution that gives notice to the community, like these are the items we're looking at. And if it's a complete tear down in a district, like say the village that we know one day, or the mission district we know one day probably will be designated, let's send those types of projects to the commission. And it may be the commission can say, no, we don't need to review this. That doesn't necessarily mean it has to go to the commission, but we give them the opportunity.
Okay, Councilmember Costanzo?
I just say we stay the course, and I still think it's in its infancy. I think we're
Okay, could you turn on your mic? I'm sorry.
I'm tired. I didn't take a break.
If you need another one,
No.
Okay. Yeah.
No, and I just feel that we should just stay the course. I think we're on the right track. Again, trying to provide more resources to the commission so they can continue to do what they do best, and staff also. So I'm not sure about a resolution, but I think there's ways that they can continue to work together to make things happen.
Okay. What else?
I mean, I agree. I mean, I think staff is already making recommendations. The commission, I think, have the wherewithal to make recommendations also. I think you already have. So let's just continue on. And in October, there's 3 projects already earmarked for their review. I don't think we need to do any more.
Okay. I agree with that. Councilmember Leal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And well, I'm just thinking, you know, neighboring cities, this one on the north side, San Marino, they really do have beautiful historic properties. You know, not just homes, but they don't have the historic preservation commission. So how do they do it? You know, I guess it's the planning and the design review and the community. They all work together and they can identify and without the commission's involvement. So I don't know. Maybe Tracy, you can answer that question.
CEQA tends to be the driver in San Marino.
Oh, okay.
A lot of the projects tend to be wholesale changes, some of which there is some language in the code that allows them to go through kind of a more intense review process. Also, there are some cities nearby that just have basically said a lot of the roles and responsibilities that might normally be dedicated to a historic preservation commission, in the absence of one, just go straight to planning commission. So in that sense, the planning commission is just wearing multiple hats and acting as a historic preservation authority as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I think we've heard from 4 members of the council, at least, that staying the course and continuing the great work that the commission and staff are doing in this area is what we would like. Is there a need to make a motion? Just receive and file of the report. And again, thank you for this it was very thought-provoking and informative, educational discussion. And I have no doubt that we probably will be talking about it again in the future. So thank you. Next item, please.
Presentation on the Public Works Citywide Maintenance Program. Presentation will be made by Public Works Director and City Engineer Greg DeVink.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, given the late hour, this is only about a 15-minute presentation. It's informational only, but if everybody is tired, we can re-agendize this for a future meeting.
Yeah, I think we've put it off once before, and but I will ask, hopefully, if I will keep my questions and comments to a minimum, if everybody else will. Although this is something that is near and dear to all of our hearts, because we're very, very interested.
And if I could give just a 30-second intro as to why this is on the agenda. One of the things that's phenomenal about the City of San Gabriel staff is how responsive they are. I think you all have known that a lot longer than I have, but in the short time I've been here, it seems like every call that a community member or a council person makes, we drop everything and head across town to fix that issue. And it's become so apparent that it happens so often that I was starting to become a little concerned that when you are so responsive and you drop what you're doing and go and fix every item without any plan, then you really never get anything done. You're going from one side of the city to the other. You're responding to issues and not doing it with a plan. When Greg came on board, I did not have a chance to have that conversation with him. He did his thing and had some great hires that he made. With those new hires and folks that left, the created openings, he's done some incredible job of promoting folks. And about a month and a half ago, he came to me and said, hey, I've got this new program we've implemented. It's a preventative, proactive maintenance program, and it's exactly what I was going to have the conversation with him about. And the main thing you'll see is not only do we have a coordinated and calculated approach to what we're going to do, but it's dropped our community requests almost in half or less, because those complaints or those concerns are getting addressed before they come up to being complaints or concerns. And the last reason I have it up in front of all of you is because Public Works does a lot of things great, but they are terrible at self-promotion. And it's one of those departments that the best thing that you could say is if you don't have any concerns, then you don't hear about them. If your water turns on, if your toilet flushes, if your street is as free of potholes as possible. So I would like to force our folks, especially those departments that are behind the scenes, to get up more in front of the council and the 4 community members that are still here tonight to tell what's going on and what kinds of things we do behind the scenes. So with that, Greg.
Thanks, Mark, and thank you, Greg.
All right. Well, it is pretty much what I was going to say, so it's okay. I am excited. I know not everybody shares my affinity for maintaining infrastructure, but it excites me. So here we are, Mayor and City Council. I'm here to give an update on what Public Works has kind of evolved into most recently. And it's essentially our shift into a more proactive approach to fixing things around the city, rather than, as Mark described, being reactive. When I came here 9 months ago, really what I needed to do was to observe the operations of Public Works, the staff we have, the resources, the budget, how we do everything. And it was very apparent that we had phenomenal response time. Anybody complained about anything, we would get right on it. But that was always reactive. We never got ahead of the problem. And it was just going to be a never-ending thing, and I didn't want to keep it that way. I wanted to plan to get ahead. So where I kind of got the idea, thinking out loud with staff, was I seeded this all with the idea of we're going to have reactive Mondays. I just came up with a term, or reactive Thursdays, whatever worked. And the rest of the week, for an emergency, if it's a traffic signal, we'll be out there right away. But if someone says my street light's out, my stop bar is faded, I need a little longer red curb, we're not going to drop it and get right on it. It's going to be a reactive Thursday or whatever. That kind of started the idea in the maintenance operations program, and it evolved into what I'm going to go over now. So here we go, with effects. So Public Works is made up of 5 groups. It's administration, where I am, and we answer the calls, we look after some environmental compliance issues, we deal with some funding and budgeting of the whole operation. And then engineering, to put it very simply, they manage the design and construction of our capital infrastructure programs. They also do plan checking and map reviews and some grant applications and such. We have fleet, which is painfully obvious that they manage our fleet, but on top of that, they are constantly purchasing gas, keeping our dispensers running in diesel and gas for police and fire. And they also are responsible for our 7 emergency generators, which require constant testing and certification. We have parks and facilities, who maintain all our parks and our pools and all our buildings, city trees. And then we have field operations, which does most of what this presentation is going to be about. They look after their areas of responsibility, our streets and sidewalks, and it's all the maintenance of these things. The streets and sidewalks, traffic signals and street lights, street signs, painted legends, storm drains, sewer systems, and they are quite often the group that's called to respond to, hey, there's a refrigerator on my sidewalk today. So they do that. In evolving to a proactive approach, we kind of made that decision that I discussed earlier, and in doing that, we created a program that involves planned inspections and focused maintenance tasks, rather than being scatterbrained and reactive to whatever comes in that hour. We jump on it. Now we can plan our work and do things much more efficiently. That made the switch from being reactive to more proactive, and it increased efficiency like crazy. If you can imagine, through your day, you get a call for a street light over here, and a stop bar over there, and a red curb here, and trash over there. Now we plan our work. We send the crews out to work in one area at a time and just focus on it and get their job much more productive. This dramatically improved productivity by effectively planning and staying focused on those tasks and eliminating much of the disruption. The way this all happens is we start with a map, and we have this bizarre map that we came across, and it was developed years ago by staff, and I found out actually today that this map was created and it's used for our tree maintenance program. As we contract out and do tree maintenance ourselves and through West Coast arborists, we give them sections of the city at a time and they go out and do this. But we adopted it for many of our other operations And so breaking the city into 10 manageable pieces allows us to complete much more thorough inspections and repairs. It improves our control over scheduling and resources of what we need to procure and get this done. The work is much more focused. It improves our ability to track and report our progress and what inventory we have. It provides a much more noticeable service level to the residents and businesses. If you can envision somebody reports my streetlights out, but there's 2 more down the block that are out, we fixed one, they kind of see their streetlights are still out. If we manage one section at a time and fix all the streetlights, they see, hey, my city's well maintained, I don't have a streetlight problem. So it does make it better that way. We have measured, because we track key performance indexes of complaints and requests for service that come in, and we've noticed a decrease already. And the staff gets a greater sense of accomplishment because you actually get through a section. It's not like this is never going to end, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life, which they may be, but they get satisfaction of completing something. It's a manageable task. So where this all started in bite-sized pieces, we're taking one essentially 10th of the city at a time, and for our first phase, we were focused on streetlights, traffic signals, stop signs, and painted legends. What we do at the beginning of each phase is we send staff out in the dark for one day or one night, and they will review all the stop signs, traffic signals, safety lights on the traffic signals, street lights for reflectivity. And you can see in the pictures, that's a removed stop sign that looks completely normal in the daytime. You'd think it really wasn't worn out. But you put it in our dark warehouse to simulate nighttime and take a picture of it with the flash, which simulates car headlights, you can see how drastically different they are. And this isn't the worst of them. This is just one we grabbed for this presentation. Over the following 3 weeks after that initial inspection, it typically takes 3 weeks to get to a section of the map. We change every burnt out bulb, and we change every faded stop sign in that 3-week period, and we're going to repeat that every year. We'll do the whole city, all 10 zones every year for those items. At the same time this is going on, and in the same zone, a paint crew goes out, and we refresh our stops and bars, red curbs with new paint. This we're going to do every 2 years because it just lasts a bit longer and doesn't need it, except in school zones with the yellow crosswalks and maybe refreshing their curbs. In school zones, we'll do that every year. The rest we're going to do every 2 years. And the reason for that is our staff is just small. We can't just use them for everything all the time. So if year 2, we're not doing such a concentrated effort on stops and bars, we will be doing something else. So since initializing this program, we've done everything except Zone 5, which oddly enough is the zone we're in right now. But probably over October and touching November, Zone 5 will be done too, for streetlights, stop signs, paint. And a little note is we do have one phase that's kind of not showing up here, but when school gets out in the summer, we jump on the school zones. It's not any of these 10, but we have another, I'll show you a layer later that has where all our school districts are, and we jump on the yellow curbs or crosswalks when school is out. Second phase, what everybody really wants for Christmas, potholes. So the way we're doing this one is, again, we're going back to the 10-zone map, and this has been started very recently because these same guys were doing other things. 2 days a week, we send out our hot mix truck, and it can carry up to 2 tons, but when they're doing small potholes, like you can see in the photo, we really don't get much material down. We can do a lot of potholes, but it doesn't add up to many tonnage or much tonnage. But 2 days a week, we focus on one section. They've already done section 1 and 4, and then just kind of, this is sort of reactive, sort of proactive. Some complaints came in through Councilmember Liao of a lot of potholes on Valley. So they jumped off, they finished 1 and 2, and they jumped, or 1 and 4, and they jumped down to Valley. So they've been working on Valley, jumping on that, but they're still staying fully productive. Valley alone is a big enough job that they're not getting sidetracked and they're being productive. Our repairability in-house is limited to potholes and utility cuts. We don't have the means to effectively resurface large areas or whole streets. We are also currently not able to address cracks or rutting. Rutting is where generally heavy truck traffic creates divots where the tires constantly roll. We can't really fix that. But we are considering purchasing or leasing a crack seal trailer in the future to take care of another task to slow degradation. And also when we put out resurfacing projects, the simple ones with a rubber overlay or a slurry coat, the contractors do crack seal first and we pay for that. I'm of the attitude that we can do a lot of things ourselves with at least as good quality and a lot more cost effectively than contracting it out all the time. We acknowledge that degraded gutters in the edges of roads typically crumble and require a lot of material. So the tonnage goes very fast. If I focused on that, we would go pick up 2 tons and we would do just 3 properties worth in front of 3 homes and be done. We'd be out of material. So what we do is at the end of the day, if there's an hour left and they have half a ton left, they know where these bigger problems are and they will go shoot the hot asphalt into those areas because the truck has a heater, it stays warm. And they will compact it and just get rid of their extra material just for efficient use of materials. This program, as soon as all sections are done, they will start all over again, and it is not going to end in the foreseeable future because we've all seen our streets. Zone 1 and 4 are done, as I said. They're working on Valley right now. The sewer system is an entirely different animal. We're not using that 10-zone map. The sewer system is kind of not conducive to the 10 zones. It is a gravity system. It's much more complicated. Pipes flow into each other. You can't break it out that easily. The way we're going to handle, or we have been handling GIS and migrating into proactive, is that right now already we are maintaining all 72 miles of our sewer. They're all getting cleaned every year at least once. With the Vector truck you see in the picture, and then we have several miles of sewer mains that run through people's backyards. This truck can't get there. We have a drivable, portable jet trailer that we wheel into backyards, and they're still surprisingly productive with it. They can do a half mile a day with that trailer in people's backyards. There's many problematic sections in the city, and it's due to condition, capacity, fat soils and grease near restaurants that require many cleanings a year. So we do that too, and over time we've learned where these problems generally are, and we've invested in smart manhole covers that transmit data of manholes slowly backing up, and we can jump on them, and with real-time data we can find problems much quicker before they become a spill and get us in trouble again. The sewer lift station is also a fairly new and very problematic feature of our city. We inspect this every week, which means go down in the dry side and take apart the pumps and look at the inlets and make sure everything's working right, because we had problems when debris gets in there, it's breaking them. And the downside effect of the wet well going down, well, we know what that is, and we really want to try hard to not do that again. The wet well side, because it doesn't have grinders and it has, in my opinion, a substandard pump design, tends to build up solids. We go in there, our plan is every 3 months, and you see in the top right picture, lowering one of our lucky employees into the wet well. And so below his feet, 20 feet down, is what I call a fatberg. And so there's a layer that builds up in there, and when we started doing this, it was about 2 feet thick, and you could walk on it, and there's fresh sewage under it. We turn the pumps off so we can raise it up. It goes up and down with the sewage level. It does interfere with some of our telemetry equipment, plugging it up, so we want to keep it low. But we have to deal with it. Eventually, it'll shut the system down. So quarterly, we send a guy down there with a shovel. You can see the lucky guy's handing him a shovel. And the first attempt we did, we actually just barreled up 5-gallon buckets of solid sewage, and we put it into 55-gallon drums. We filled 20 of them up, and we had them properly disposed of and paid a fee for it. It took 2 days. We recently did this only 2-ish weeks ago, and we used the Vector truck. The Vector truck is still not strong enough to break up the solids, so a guy still goes down there with a shovel and guides the hose around, breaks it up, loosens it up, but gets the solids out into the Vector truck. That we did the equivalent in about 1 day. And what was really great is the city of LA lets us use their dumping facility for free. So we've saved money, we've saved time, it's much more efficient, it's more pleasant for the guys to not be down there 2 days. So it's a much better process. But it's going to be a forever problem until we redesign this station. And also, these 3 staff have started taking over our fats, oils, and grease program, and what that requires is visiting every single restaurant every year and inspecting their grease traps and their policies and their documentation that everything's going well. So this is something we used to pay a consultant every year in the ballpark of, I think, $62,000. We're doing it in-house. The cleaning out of the solids in the wet well, the last time we had a consultant come out and do it, it was, I think, $38,000. Now we do it ourselves in 1 day. So we're being much more smarter, using the equipment we have, being proactive. As I said, the sewer doesn't comply to that 10-section map. We're using GIS for that. And this is just a screenshot of our GIS map. And every dot you see on there is since August 1, when we adopted a GIS program to start tracking, planning, and documenting our progress in maintaining the sewers. So every dot on there has been opened up and had the jet truck sent down, and we document the progress. And the way it works is this is an interactive map, so you can see one dot is blue. So before we took the screenshot, we clicked on 1 and it turned blue. And then it brought up that bar on the bottom and gave the manhole ID. It said who worked on it, what date they did it. And on the right, it gives all the statistics. And that column goes way down. This is a slide, so I can't scroll it. But it gives all the information. And what we can do is we can make notes of not only when it was cleaned, but I found roots, there was excessive fat, it had cockroaches, whatever the problem is, we can document it. And we can run reports to say, show me everything I need to do. What was cleaned in the last, or what's due for cleaning? What are the problem areas? Show me everything that had roots, and we hire a root contractor. So this greatly improves our ability to plan. So now I have a GIS demonstration, and let's see if this actually works. It does work. So this is our GIS map that we're building. It is online. We will eventually share most of it with the public. It'll be linked through our website. And what you're about to see here was accomplished with 6 weeks of a summer intern. You're going to love this, because I do. So what we have, if I zoom in for more detail, imagine the whole city looks like this, but I can turn on every manhole. There it goes. And I can click on any manhole, and I can get the data for it. It'll just tell me all this stuff, how deep it is. For some reason, at work, I can scroll down and see more, but you can kind of get the idea that I can see all kinds of stuff. I can also see every main. And as we go through this consent decree and we do our projects and we do repairs and we do linings, that'll all be updated on this map. And we can get dates of when it was lined, what methodology was used, and even get plans and everything for it. The pavement index is another thing, which we're familiar with this one because we did a presentation not too long ago. This is something you've generally seen from our pavement index report. It ranks the conditions from 0 to 100, green being good, red being bad. But what's really great about this is that this is the overall map. But what I can do is I can look at projects not only by this and filter them. Rather than be, again, kind of reactive in planning our work, I can be proactive and say, show me the appropriate streets for this repair methodology. Show me which ones are suitable for a rubber overlay. And I can get that on here, and I can spit out the limits of what I want to plan as a project. I think it's a smarter way to design it to be more efficient, get more scope, more economy of scale on the particular methodology. And so I can also go in here and I can pick projects by replacement method. And we all know we have a lot of very bad streets, and we all know those are by far the most expensive to repair. But just by clicking this, you can see in our last 5-year history, these are the streets where we've done full remove and replace, the most expensive streets, the ones that were the very worst. And you can show we've done a very serious effort to address a lot of our very worst streets. What is also very cool about this is I can go and click on a street, and it'll tell me what's going on with that. It'll load up the plans for that project. I can now see what happened on that street, what was the design plans. Like GIS, you can tag it with anything. I can do construction photographs. I can document where we found something in the way. So it does an awful lot of things that are very cool. So we do have the different types of, well, there are other areas of the city. But you can see by our different types of projects, more and more things are turning on and off. We have layers. I'll go quickly through storm water system. So these are, whoa, mouse is not cooperating. So we have catch basins, we have manholes, we have our gravity mains for the storm system. We have laterals, which are very few documented so far. It takes a long time to build these layers. We have our open channels, so that's our stormwater system. We can also plan maintenance right now. We're contracting with the county for cleaning our storm drain catch basins 4 times a year. They gave us a very good price for that. We do have traffic signals. We're going to be doing a tremendous amount of work in traffic signals in the near future, largely with the 710 freeway money. I'm going to give another update on that in the near future, but we got a lot of money almost exclusively for signals and intersection upgrades. We actually found a layer of fire hydrants, so we just put it on here. I don't know who did it. Fats, oils, and grease is our program, so we actually can use this to go and check any restaurant and plan our routes for what we're going to do. I can click on, let me see, I don't know why it's not going. I can click on any restaurant, and it'll give me the name of the restaurant, the contact information. We go do there. We'll attach our reports. If we issued citations, it'll all be in here as we use and grow this system. We'll go out. We do have schools. This is where we go in the summertime for our striping. We have water districts. This city is served by 5 separate water districts. And so when someone calls in and reports, and this is good citywide when we can all share this, someone might not know and they call community development or somebody and say, water's coming out of the street in front of my house. Well, I'll be able to get to this layer and click on where the problem is and get the water district. Call this number. This is the right water district for that address. So it's a good resource. It was very quick and easy to do. And then we have last this map that we are now familiar with, the 10 weird zones. So that is the GIS that it is our future. I'm going to migrate all of our maintenance programs that I can onto this. So that's what I ultimately want to do. And let me see, is it that one? And we are now very near the end. Aside from all those things, Public Works does a lot of one-off things. We do a lot of projects that aren't so programmed. We just don't really have the resources to change all our broken sidewalks and ADA ramps. But what Public Works does is concrete work for worn, damaged sidewalks, curbs, gutters, ADA ramps, and driveways. We do regular inspections of our traffic signals and monthly inspections of all the push buttons. We take care of all the landscape needs for our parks and the metro parking lots. We trim and replace the city-owned trees. We maintain storm drains, public restrooms, park equipment, signage, monuments, and bus stops for Metro again. We do continuous improvements and repairs to our city facilities. One would be this screen, and one would be your buzzer switch. Councilmember Harrington, we fixed it. Whoops. We operate our community pool and keep it running, not the programs, but the actual physical facility and our play equipment. And we have a fleet, I counted this morning, of 132 vehicles. That does include plated trailers, but we have our fuel facilities and our 7 generators. And I don't know what just happened. Okay, so all this great work is happening because we have great staff that love their work. We have a positive attitude and excellent relationships with other departments. We have the needed support of council, management, and the community. And we have trust and mutual respect. and we're all proud to be part of this city. So the last thing I want to say, before you have questions, if you have questions, is that I hope I can convey the enthusiasm and excitement I have and the appreciation for really what a great group of staff Public Works has. They are phenomenal employees. They really care. They don't complain about what they're assigned to do. They do their job well all day, every day. They get new assignments all the time. Sometimes it's tedious. Sometimes it's shoveling sewage, to put it nicely. They don't complain. I haven't heard one guy complain about being lowered into that hole. They do their job. So that's it. If you have questions, that is the end. So, all right. Thanks for staying.
Thank you, Greg. I think that really does deserve a round of applause. And I feel like, you've finally brought us into the 21st century, and so personally, and I think on behalf of the council and the community, to thank to Mark and all of the staff, Public Works staff, for doing all this work, and also modernizing how we manage it so that we can be more efficient and not just putting out fires. So I think I can almost feel I think I can anecdotally feel the improvement as well, just in driving around the city, being a community member. I always say that there's at least three ways to define a city. One is as a community, it's the people, the businesses, and the institutions. Two is as the organization, the municipal corporation that that provides all these city services. And then three is the physical place that is the city. That's all the things that you're maintaining here. And they obviously all have interactions with each other, and I think that I've noticed a huge improvement in how the physical place of the city is being maintained and kept up recently as opposed to the past. So that's all that I wanted to say. Other comments? Yeah,
just real briefly, first of all, thank you so much. I just wish we would have done this up front, because it deserves front and center, the good work that you're doing. But I know we had quite a lot this evening, but maybe next time, for next year, I'd love to put you up front, because I think this is, a lot of times we're being defined by Public Works, to be perfectly honest. I mean, there's things that, something about our streets and just our whole infrastructure. It is important, but I think for so long it kind of defined us. And, the good work is being noticed. And, I really want to thank you for your leadership, too. You've really made some good changes. So thank you.
Others? Councilor Leal? No.
I just want to say thank you. Yeah, because your new leadership in Public Works Department makes a whole lot of difference. However, I have a question for you. Sure. Real quick. Yeah. We received major W, about $450,000. What do you do with the funding?
Funding for what? I didn't hear you.
It's a major stormwater.
I'm not certain. I believe that fund can roll over, and we might grow and get more. I don't remember the specific details. Some of those funds are attached with a match that I don't really think we're in a financial position to come up with a match. I know we've discussed possibly diverting water out of the flood channel, the Alhambra Wash, into possibly a cistern at Lugo Park. I would like to consider probably baby steps of something similar but much less costly, and I think still almost as effective. I kind of envision a project where we do divert water out of that same wash at the same place and filter it, pump it into the park, but pump it into that little creek we built that's always dry. That will serve as infiltration. It'll get less water out to the ocean. It'll get water to recharge our aquifers. It meets the intent without a massive multi-million-dollar cistern that I don't think we can afford right now. for ultimately, it's nice of the idea. My opinion is it's feel good to reuse water and reclaim it and use it for irrigation, but the payback is never for that investment. And I think I envision something smaller. And I don't have a lot of history here, but I've heard that location was used as a dump site for the freeway construction, and as soon as we dig, change orders are going to fly our way because it's full of concrete debris. So.
Okay, thank you. Again, great job. Thank you. Oh, a correction. I complained on Las Tunas Drive, hundreds of potholes from St. Gabriel to the Alhambra border.
If you've seen the map, after Valley, the next zone goes back up north to zone 2 and 3. The bottom of those zones is Las Tunas. I just told staff, start on Las Tunas and then go up. So we will be getting those as soon as Valley's caught up a little bit. Don't expect Valley to look wonderful. It won't. None of them will from this effort, but it should eliminate the risk of potholes and accidents and vehicle damage, and we're trying to get ahead of that.
Thank you, Greg. Yes, Councilmember Harrington.
I just have one comment. If that was you showing excitement and enthusiasm, I'm not playing poker with you.
It was. That's my 10.
You want to add anything?
Okay.
Awesome. Yes, great job. And yeah, I agree with Mark too. We should be hearing and seeing this kind of things, these kinds of things more often. It was really informative, and also makes us also to be proud of to be part of the city as well. So thank you. Next item. So next is the what? City
Public comment?
Oh, next item is first public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to address the city council? Seeing none, I hereby close public comment. City manager's report. Mark says nothing tonight. Council comments and conference/meeting reports. Start with Councilmember Costanzo.
I'll see you at Dumplings and Beer on Friday.
Okay. Councilmember Leal.
Okay, so Saturday I attend the Jupiter Chorus 33 years annual concert, and which I started 33 years ago in St. Gabriel Village. We started singing Italian opera choruses and Germans, and then now pretty much Japanese and Chinese. So after 33 years, they still singing. So if you have not started singing yet, I heard singing is the best exercise. So try that. Another event I attend is 48th anniversary of Chinatown Services. They started out in Chinatown, and they helped low-income and seniors to apply for social services. Now they expand to 6 different locations, and one is on 555 West Las Tunas Drive in St. Gabriel, and that is the medical clinic for all kinds of health cares. This I have to tell you because this is very important for our community, because just recently they found Californians, 7.5 million Californians might have exposed to this cancer-causing chemical, and that chemical is called PFAS, and that's for carpet stand and water resistant, also for furnitures and that kind of stuff. So several cities, including Southern California, and they are, I guess I don't know the real detail, but 40% of this chemical is exceeding the allowable, FPA allowable, but for next ENR meeting, we're going to invite Upper San Gabriel Water District to come to our meeting and explain, and maybe they can tell us still safe to drink tap water in our area, because Corona is one area, and Pendleton is another, Sacramento and Orville and Rosemount in the Northern California. So it becomes a serious issue for Californians. So thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Machaca?
Briefly, just to let our colleagues know that Councilmember Harrington and I, we continue to meet with Athens, and we've had about 4 meetings. So we need a couple more, hopefully. But it's been very, very productive. I believe that we've made some real good inroads, and looking forward to be able to share that at a future agenda item. And then lastly, just wanted to congratulate Mayor Pooh on the State of the City address and the staff for all the support. I think it was well done, well received. If you missed it, you can go online. The video is there to see. So thank you to our mayor and to the staff.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
When you guys meet with Athens, can you remind them not to do street sweeping at 8 in the morning when all the cars are about? It's better to do it in the middle of the
fine
night.
details in the contract. Yeah.
That's what they were doing this morning.
I see. Yeah. Councilmember Harrington?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Dumplings and Bears Friday, so I hope to see everyone there. And then Saturday, the San Gabriel Valley Humane Society is having their 95th anniversary, so remind everyone to go to that. It's 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., I believe is the time. So hope to see everyone there.
Yes, thank you for the reminders. And I'll just do quick updates on the things that I've attended since the last one. A couple weeks ago, there was an 88 City Summit that was done by the LA Economic Development Corporation. And I just wanted to highlight, we went over the results of a study that was done by Loyola Marymount University about rating basically people's satisfaction in 6 different areas throughout Southern California, basically. And I'll just note that in 5 out of the 6 categories, the San Gabriel Valley rated the highest. So for built environment recreation is 1, crime and safety is another, community/culture is the 3rd, employment and affordability, utilities and services, San Gabriel Valley, which is SPA 3 in sort of planning terms, it's the service planning areas. We ranked the number 1 in all of LA County, and in the last one, transportation, we ranked 2nd after SPA 7, which is the eastern portion of the county. So and then I brought these for the council to review and take a look at. That day was also the COG board meetings, notably there. The COG board, the full board, did vote to support the SR60 route for the Gold Line East Side extension. That has been brought into question. I'm not sure exactly why, but it was one of the 4 pillar projects under Measure M. So it was something that was promised to the community when we voted on Measure M, and also I think it's important that we keep those transportation dollars in the San Gabriel Valley. The other route, main route that was being considered would go down the 5 to the Citadel, essentially, and a little bit beyond that into Whittier. And so it wouldn't really service the San Gabriel Valley at all. So I'm happy the COG did vote for that, and I think it was interesting because it actually required some advocacy, and I may have ruffled some feathers in that respect, but I think it's the right thing from a policy perspective and the best thing for the region. The San Gabriel Valley Economic Partnership Gala was on Saturday, and Vice Mayor Machaca was there. Mark Christoffels got a well-deserved award. The State of the City was last Tuesday. Last Wednesday was the LA County Mayor's Gathering, convened by Mayor Garcetti. Dr. Lucy Jones was there, who's a kind of a celebrity on earthquakes and disaster preparedness. And one of the themes about it was disaster preparedness. And I'm glad that Greg had mentioned, maintenance of some of the backup generators and emergency equipment that we need, because these are things that you can't. Obviously the best way to be is to be prepared, and I think that making sure that we are also prepared and can deal with those kinds of situations is it's comforting from a community member standpoint. The last thing, and as he mentioned also, the Metro Board did vote to approve the round 2 of the 710 funding, which is a part of what Greg was referring to in his presentation, and thanks to Greg too for attending that Metro Board meeting. There were some concerns that there might be some opposition or things going on, but it seemed to pass unanimously, and as part of that funding, then we will be able to do a lot of our signal improvements and so forth, in addition to potentially other things. The Census Complete Count Committee met for the first time last Thursday, and those efforts are going well. I think it was well attended. I was encouraged to see how many different parts of the community came to that first meeting, and we'll continue to sort of try to engage all the different stakeholders and groups, different populations within the community and beyond, actually. And I feel like I feel very optimistic that we will get that fair, accurate, and inclusive count that we're hoping for, and that will again very much tell our story, which is something that is used by public and private sector alike, in terms of demographics, income levels, so forth and so on. That having accurate information, I think, in that respect, is definitely important for us. So that's my report, and the next City Council meeting will be on Tuesday, October 15th at 6:30 p.m. here in the Council Chambers. We are adjourned. Thank you.